Board games, board games, it's what we're talking about. Board games, I'm not gonna shout. I am starting off this morning with a little bit of singing. And over here, to this side of me, is James Hamilton, also known as Hammy. Hammy is a person who's with fingers in many pies. And we will be discussing all these sizes and all these things that Hammy's already done. Whether they were enjoyed, whether they were fun. We'll be talking about board games and all sorts of things. It's what we're talking about. Board games and Hammy's life. I'm not gonna shout. Good morning, good afternoon, good whatever it is, wherever you are. This is episode 356 of BEZZY Beats and Board Game Blether, and today I am meeting James Hammy Hamilton, chatting about life, games, retail, business, and all sorts of things that you've been involved with. Thank you for joining me, and yeah, I've seen your name pop up on a lots of Facebook groups, and coming in as a I'm not going to say a voice of experience or a voice of reason, because let's be honest, that there's a lot of those. There's a lot of people who are super experienced and super reasonable, and I think that's a great thing about retailers and business owners in the board game space all working together. But the thing about you is that when I reached out and then you said, oh yes, I'd love to be on, and I dropped the ball, and I'm so sorry about that. But anyway,
Don't worry.
Lovely to have you on. And is there anything that we need to get out of the way right now before what we're going to, as always, talk about recent highlights, have some questionably quick questions, maybe just one or two, and then we'll talk about your life starting from the start, from childhood, and going all the way through everything you've done with regards to board games.
I can't think of anything that's urgent and needs to be said now. I have a habit of rambling. You will discover that. I'm good at rambling. It's great to be here. Episode 356. You've been busy, haven't you?
Yes, since lockdown, it's been a new passion, new way to keep myself socially occupied. And hello, Timmy. It is lovely to have you in the audience. Thank you for joining us. And that's the thing. It feels like, you know how it is. This is recorded for, if anyone's watching it after the fact, on 27th of April 2021. And as far as the UK goes, we are just ending the third lockdown where shops are allowed to open. Kind of.
Well, is it technically second? Well, I think, third, second, third. We're lending, shops can open. Yes. But it's still a bit restricted, and yeah. Yes.
Let's talk about some recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights, recent highlights, playing games and other delights, recent highlights. So as regular listeners might know, I am now in London, whereas I was with my parents for a third of a year, which is longer than I'd been there in a decade, basically. You know, that's the way that things go sometimes. Anyway, so I'm back here. I had a game date with Layla. We are fortunate enough to have a garden, and we played a bunch of games. We played Polarity. I don't know if you know this one with with the little magnetic discs, and it's quite tricky. One problem that I have with that game is that the first person to make a mistake, you've just got fewer targets, and so there's a bit of a positive feedback loop. There's a bit of a runaway leader.
I think playing Polarity outside is brave, because the way the things work is it just a gentle breeze could unbalance it. It's a very clever game, proper physics game. I like that.
And I love playing with magnets. Playing with magnets is just super fun.
Trying to see. In fact, how about this? You're going to be impressed.
Oh, you've got the tube version.
I've got one in a It's in a Hessian tube. I've had it for years.
You know, I feel really underprepared because I'm still getting, my excuse is that I'm still getting, you know, comfortable in London.
This just happens to be in my near where I'm sitting in my games room. But yeah, it's a bit of a fluke. So yeah, this one, my version comes with a Hessian mat.
Oops, same here.
And then a massive tube with all of the magnets in it. Yeah.
My one, the Hessian map is sort of folded to be into a box. I think your version actually looks more practical because then you don't get the creases and the folds.
Yeah, yeah. This is. I'm probably must have picked it up at Essen, but it would have been quite a long time ago.
It's 2006. I've noticed on the box, and apparently, if I followed the websites, which I didn't do yet, I would find a thriving community, which I somewhat doubt. But oh no, sorry,
yeah,
it said active community.
Well. It is an interesting game.
Hello, Nicholas. It is lovely to see you, and hello, Hal. Good morning to you as well, and Alex. Hello, and thank you very much for jumping in, one and all of you. Lots of love. We're just talking about games we've been. Well, I was talking about games that I was recently playing, and then James apparently just has all of these things randomly lying around. I was trying to think.
I have quite a few games, not as many, not compared to the whole marketplace. Back in the about 2005, I had a lot higher proportion because there were less games to have, and you know, you just run out of space, don't you? You have too many games.
Yeah, I'm going to try and cut down my games by about 40%, which is really hard to do. But
yeah, I wanted to have a purge, and I had a long, hard look at my games collection. I managed to come up with a stack of 5 that I was going to put on the selling pile out of about 500. So maybe need to work a bit harder on that.
I've got to do something where I kind of, I don't know, every week one game wouldn't be quite enough. I would have to do like every week, you know, maybe 3 games that I decide to, okay, these are the games that, much as I love them, I'm not playing them enough for whatever reason.
You can't get rid of a game that just because it's not being played.
You can, because then other people are going to play them.
No. I have games that I bought when I was a teenager that I bought as a retirement project. I kid you not. I actually have a game I bought when I was 19 and I knew it was going to be difficult to get it in the long term. And I bought it with the expectation that maybe I'd play it when I'm retired.
I have some similar things with SNES games, but the thing about board games is you need other people, and what you need you can't. It's not just sitting. And Alex mentions, can you imagine having all the games like the British Library? In theory, has all the books. Could you imagine a great big building?
There'd be lots of it I'd ignore, but I could imagine it. Yeah,
I think that would be pretty cool. I mean, that would be a pretty big building.
It would be enormous. I mean, well, was it 1,000 new games came out at Essen in 2019, something like that?
I mean, they estimated about like 5,000 in the English language, and
I think it's 5,000 come out a year or thereabouts. And obviously,
in total in the year.
Yeah.
But that's just in the English language because there's so many.
Yes, that's true.
That don't get translated.
A lot of games.
I mean, presumably this library would just be the games that are in the English language. And
what about games in more than one language?
Oh, like if it's in more than one language, there's
as long as one of them's English, then it's allowed.
Okay. Yes.
Be an interesting
as long as it's being translated, as long as there's English rules.
I think Board Game Geek's up into the 300,000s for database references. The newer games.
Wow. Apparently, there's an initiative by the German Game Designers Guild, SATS, I assume, to have the board games be included in the German National Library. Yeah. That's really cool.
Back when I was working with Warfrog, or when I was involved in Warfrog, every year, I can't remember. There was one of the German couple that used to come around every year, and they did actually manage a games library. I think it was their personal games library, but it was kind of almost a German games library. Yeah. Yeah, we gave them a copy of the game every year, and so all the Warfrog games and all the Treefrog games are sitting in their library, probably unopened. Yeah, it was an interesting time, that was. But there are so many games; it's scary. It really is. And yeah. Anyway, yes, we've waffled away from things.
No, it's all good.
Recent events.
Yes, talk about your
bizarrely not been playing many games because there's this thing called the lockdown. I'm not actually allowed to play games, although I have managed to play.
Do you not have a garden or anything?
I have a garden, but my normal gaming group used to meet on a Wednesday evening, and going in the garden on a Wednesday evening in the UK. Well, in fact, until a few weeks ago, until a couple of weeks ago, we couldn't even meet in the garden for about 6 months because of the various lockdowns that we were in the Manchester area. It was worse. But yeah, most of the games we normally play for playing board games, wouldn't really like being played outside because of wind and rain and cold. I have done some tabletop miniatures games, war games, but I've done them over... I say over Zoom, it's actually over Facebook Messenger, where I set up all the models and things on my table, or the guy at the other end does the same, and then one of us says what we're going to do, and the other person moves the models on the table, and then we roll the dice and we play a proper war game. I've done a few of those. I had a game with a guy in Ireland. Mostly I've been with this one guy in Ireland, but last weekend I played a game with a guy in Ireland, and somebody in Florida was watching in. So it was quite an interesting experience and went very well. That's as well as board games. I'm a tabletop miniatures gamer and a role player and a LARPer and a reenactor, and been there, done that, got the t-shirt. Yeah, other than that, recently I'm painting models ready for when I get back to going into new things. I'm painting models for A Song of Ice and Fire by Simon, which is a really good game with some stunning models. So yeah, I'm having fun with that.
So that sounds a lot of fun. I mean, I have to admit, I'm not a big miniatures painter. I find it a little bit more precision orientated than is my personal tastes.
Nah, you don't need precision. You don't need precision. So this guy,
let me make you bigger.
Okay, he's not quite finished yet, but he doesn't look bad, does he? He's got...
Looks very nice.
Shading. There is no shading on that model. That is all painted with the wonder of the new Games Workshop contrast paints. Oh, there we go. There we go. These are called contrast paints, or also known as talent in a pot. You prime your model, and then you just paint a block area, and the paint goes darker in all the recesses and lighter in the not recesses. Just does it for you. Makes life really easy.
Yeah, I've heard about that. I just meant more in terms of, okay, you've got to paint exactly where the hair is. Just painting within the lines gets a bit...
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Anyway, I would like to ask you, what's a typical day like for you in the past couple of weeks?
In the past couple of weeks, typical day for the past year. Basically, I spend my normal days sat in front of a computer with one eye on what's going on my game shop, one eye on what's going on with my real work, my exhibition businesses, and another eye on Facebook, because I follow things on Facebook, all the various board game groups, the wargaming groups, and so on. My business partner would say I spend too much time posting on Facebook, and I just argue that I'm retired, so it doesn't matter. There you go. No, it's juggling, and sat at home in front of a computer. I get a fair amount of Teams conversations with people, so you actually interact with people over Teams. I might go out for a walk 2 or 3 days a week, just go for a 1 or 2 mile walk when the weather's nice, which it has been quite a lot recently. But yeah, most of the time stuck in front of the computer. Evenings, watching telly. Bought an Amazon Prime subscription, watching all the interesting things on there. Historically, yeah, would have been really different. You know, regular gaming nights away. Most every other weekend would be away at a gaming event. None of that at all, which is really frustrating. And I'm so looking forward.
When you say gaming events, do you mean you would literally go to 26 conventions every year?
Tournaments and conventions, yeah, that kind of number, between 20 and 30 a year. It's not all board games, because there's board games and war games and role playing and so on. I mean, there was at peak, there was, in 1 year I didn't just attend, I ran, as in acted as the organizer or the event or tournament organizer or the full convention organizer. I ran, I think, 14 tournaments or events in 1 year. It's just what I did. I was like, oh, I'll run it. Nobody else wants to, so I'll do it. And you get a war games tournament with, I don't know, 40 people turning up, sit them down, put them in front of tables, make them play games, sort them out. Or you run a board games convention with 300 people. Or you end up being the IT guy at the Games Expo, which I got volunteered for last year. That was quite exciting. Yeah, I do a lot of tournaments. I have a very understanding other half. But she does role playing and freeform games, and we jointly organise StabCon, which is our convention, our secret convention. Best kept secret in board gaming is StabCon.
And I agree with Alex, that does sound awesome. And quick hello to J Fool's Guard. It is, of course, lovely to have you here. And I want to now open the floor to any questionably quick questions. Now, I'm not saying that we're not having questions later, but what I'm suggesting is that if you want to ask something sillier, then now is the time to do it. If you've been watching before, you know how it is. The time for silly questions is now. It's questionably quick questions. So the first question, which is very benign, is where are you located currently, in as much or as little detail as you are willing to share? And secondly, what time is it?
Ooh, it is, well, where I am, it's 10:15. How about that? That's a shock. And I'm in Stockport in my games room. I'm fortunate to have a games room. What about everybody else?
It is very fancy. I am in London and it is 10:17 because I like being a bit more precise. Aha.
Ooh.
Alex says, if you had all the games, what would you be most excited to play? If you had literally all the games right now, so you had, and that begs the question, is there a game that you would like to play that you don't currently own?
That's a really good question. I see lots and lots of hype about lots and lots. Actually, yes, there is a game that I'd like to play that I don't own, and that's Glorantha God's War. I've seen it being played, and I have a lot of. I've got a. When we get into where I've been history-wise and so on, I spent a fair amount of time, a year or two, being quite excited in Glorantha and RuneQuest and so on. And the Glorantha God's War game looks really quite interesting, but it's certainly not one I'm going to walk out and just buy because it costs all the money. So yes, that's probably the one I'd most like to play, most like to try. There you go.
Is that by Sandy Peterson, who also did Cthulhu Wars?
Yes, it is. It's Sandy Peterson Cthulhu Wars. It's the follow-on from Cthulhu Wars. And
do you have Cthulhu Wars?
No.
But you feel like you'd prefer to play the evolved?
I'd prefer to play the Glorantha-based one because I have a real liking for the Glorantha background. It's a lovely, lovely world that came out from role-playing back in my late teens, early 20s. I was doing a lot of RuneQuest role-playing, and the world is wonderful, the mythos and the background, and it's just really weird. And yeah, the fact that the way the tides work, the world's flat. It's a flat disc, but with a dome over the top of it. The sky's a dome. The moon goes up the outside of the sky, and there's a hole in the middle of the top of the sky where the moon falls through into the sea, and the moon's porous, it absorbs the water, goes out underneath, and that's what makes the tide go out. I mean, it's an amazing world. It's just lovely, and yeah, I like that.
And we had someone asking for the title again, and that is
Glorantha God's War. I think it's called God's War. Half a sec. I'll get the proper title for you. It's a big, expensive game. I can tell you that for free.
Oh yes, I see it's on Board Game Geek. It's
Glorantha the God's War. Yeah,
exactly. And I will paste a wee link to it here. And Alex is saying, "Yep, all that physics makes complete perfect sense. Of course, it
absolutely.
does."
I mean, another thing about Glorantha is that in Glorantha there are mountain ranges that are actually dragons.
Okay, so it's like the dragons have just been dormant and sleeping.
Dragons gone sleep. They're now a mountain range.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that does actually make sense.
Yeah, and then the dragons that you actually encounter in the game are called dream dragons because they're dreams of dragons. They're not actually the dragon. They're just the dragon's dream.
That begs the question: are you just a dream within the dragon's head?
Maybe. Don't know.
Oh.
It's Glorantha's lovely. It's a proper fantasy world.
I hadn't delved into it.
It's lovely.
And a shout out to Daniel Barker, who I believe did a little bit of maybe 1 or 2 pieces of art for Glorantha. And yeah, I'm actually going to double check if Daniel did for maybe the update of the RPG rather than the board game.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, just a shout out to my friend Daniel Barker. But we have another questionably quick question, which is cheese or chocolate?
Cheese.
Okay. And what Shang-Chi about enters the chat says to me, "Oh, just you might be a dragon's dream. It's the eternal question. Was I a butterfly dreaming I'm a human, or a human dreaming I'm a butterfly?"
Yeah. What we were discussing was that in Glorantha, the dragons are so big and they're dormant that they're mountain ranges. And what the characters encounter, if you encounter a dragon, it's actually the dream of a dragon. It's a non-existent. It's just the imaginings of the sleeping dragon that's physical and big and huge and scary. But they're called dream dragons, not dragons, because dragons are too big and they'd eat you. Well, they wouldn't even notice.
If they chose to, if they even noticed you, if they even deigned to pay
chocolate
attention
teapot or cheese slippers. Oh, still cheese slippers. A chocolate teapot's completely useless unless you eat
it.
If you just eat it and don't use it for tea, it would be fine. But cheese slippers, you could not wear them and just eat the cheese. So I'd still go with cheese.
And do you think that's if you're actually trying to use them for their function, then the cheese slippers have a chance of being useful? Whereas
chocolate teapot, I mean, a chocolate teapot is slightly better than chocolate fireguard, but only slightly.
Yeah, in that you're not going to kill anyone. So, let's call that... no, you can't eat them, says Alex. That's cheating.
Still the cheese slippers.
Yeah. Okay. And that concludes our questionably quick questions. Let's move on to our brilliant thing. Brilliant thing. What's the little thing which is brilliant? I completely forgot to check in with you. Do you have any brilliant thing right now?
Contrast paint is brilliant.
Okay, shouts out to Citadel Miniatures, I guess, and Games Workshop.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant in that.
How do you feel about Games Workshop in general? I'm just curious.
Well, that's quite an interesting question. How do I feel about Games Workshop? They make some amazing products. They introduce people to playing games. Personally, I don't play any Warhammer games. I do play 1 or 2. Well, I've got some Lord of the Rings miniatures, and I've played the Games Workshop Lord of the Rings game. I actually had a holiday job when I was a kid, when I was a student working in a games workshop, but that was before Citadel. We're talking a long time ago because I'm old. No, I think Games Workshop have done very good things for gaming in this country, but they've moved off into their own, effectively their own niche, which is chaos, spiky bits, orcs and goblins and so on. But loads of people are really enthused by it. You know, when we get to talking about my shop, we have a lot of Games Workshop products and regular people playing, loads of people playing Games Workshop games, and they love it to bits. So,
and I believe they have quite favourable systems in place for dealing with retailers. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean they're not bad. The way that they deal with a retailer is they have a different packages of stock that you're expected to hold to be different categories of retailer. Almost they go, you know, this basic pack or the basic pack and the next pack and so on. If you commit to storing them, we get an order we can do an order with them every week. Shipping is free regardless of the size of the order. We get advance notice of product coming out. You get reasonable levels of discount compared to, you know, similar to other distributors. They're very good at dealing with damaged product. If there's anything that's broken, they'll give you refunds and so on. They give you a marketing budget within your store, which is stuff that you can use for either prize support or free giveaways or scenery for setting up the tables. There's, yeah, I mean, as retailers, as manufacturers and producers of product go, they're great. Obviously, it's very much focused on the miniatures, which are nowadays plastic, and they're very nice, and they're encouraging people into a hobby. So I'm a fan of Games Workshop. I think they've done a great job. They're trying to make money like any other business. So, you know, people will say, "Oh, new version of the rules come out. It's just there to print money." Actually, the latest new version they brought out of Warhammer 40,000 has brought people back to the game. There were people drifting away.
Because they've continued to improve it, right? They
refreshed it. They changed it. Was it improving? It was more of a reset and taking away some of the twiddly bits and a simplification in some areas, but still keeping the diversity and value. They've done a very good job, and it's really popular. So yeah, I think they're great. If every miniatures company worked in the same kind of way as they did, I don't think the world will be a bad place. To be honest, most of them follow the Games Workshop model because it's so successful. So yeah, I'm quite a fan of Games Workshop. And a brilliant thing, say contrast paint has got me painting again, which I wasn't doing before. And that's nice.
And someone asked to understand what exactly we're talking about. This was the best image that I could find, which I think I'm allowed to.
Let me get this, hold a couple of models up because it's very clever. Basically, you have a figure that is painted plain white, and you can see the body of that is just painted, just primed on a white color. And you can see that on the legs, ooh, hang on, it's backwards. You can see that on the legs, there's now what looks like some clever muscle shading. In order to get the legs to go like that, all I did was paint a single coat of paint on it. This figure was plain white and then has been painted with all of the colors are just a single color, and it's still shiny because I've not matte varnished it yet, but it works with the quality of the model to make it look like you've done a great job painting them. And for all the games nowadays with miniatures, well, not all, a lot of them, I think that contrast paints would actually do a brilliant job of being, you know, an average painter can produce something that looks quite good in no time flat. So I think it's genuinely, it was a game changer. It really was when it came out.
Oh yeah, for sure. When it came out, I heard so much accolades, so many accolades for it, and so much excitement because wow, now I can not do all this, and it reduces the amounts of work I have to do. You aren't going to get award-winning miniatures or anything, but it's going to let you get something that looks really nice on your table, and at the end of the day, isn't what that's all about.
I'm a person who plays games. I like playing games, and I play games with miniatures. I'm not someone who wants to spend the whole time painting miniatures. I know there are people who love painting miniatures. I find painting miniatures a chore, but the contrasting has made it easier, and it's meant that I don't like playing a game without painting. If it's got miniatures, the miniatures need to be painted in my book. You know, that's just the way it works, which is actually why I'm not big into the board games that have got painted miniatures, because the time to paint the miniatures versus the time to play the game doesn't kind of add up for me.
You want to have the self-expression.
Yeah, I think so. If a miniature's there, it needs to be painted. A plain unpainted miniature's just a block of plastic. But if it's got colour on it, then it starts to get a bit of character and a bit of life, and I like that.
Wait, so just to clarify, you like it when board games come with unpainted or pre-painted miniatures?
I don't. If I was going to own a board game with nice miniatures, what was the one that came out? There was one that I've seen, some beautiful, which was of Greek gods and so on. What was it called? Can't remember. There was a board game that came out with some lovely Greek god models that were probably 4 inches tall, 5 inches tall for some of them. Beautiful figures. And we played, that's it. I think that's it. Lords of Hellas. Yeah. And I think I was playing it with my normal Wednesday games group, and it was a nice enough game. It was my friend's copy, and I was happy playing the game. But then I saw another friend of mine had painted the miniatures for it, and they were superb. Playing the game with painted miniatures for me would be a far, far better experience. I don't have the time to paint the miniatures in my own copy of the game. Therefore, I don't buy the game with the miniatures. I'll play someone else's copy, and if it's not painted, I'll live with it. I'll just play the game. But I think the experience of playing the game is going to be far better with painted miniatures. And I think, back to the brilliant thing, contrast paints make that easier. There you go.
Sounds fantastic. And hello, Mike Nods. It sounds like that might not be.
It could have been Mythic Battles Pantheon. Yes, it might have been that as well. It might have been that. You might be right. That had some love. That has some lovely. Trying to remember. Yes. May well have been Mythic Battles Pantheon, right?
So, but hello, Mike. It's lovely to have you. And I just wanted to acknowledge this comment beforehand by Alex, who says, one thing that's changed over the last decade or so is that you can't possibly even consider every game release anymore. Even if you're a store owner, even if you're a reviewer, you can't totally even... True. Yeah. Totally true. Whereas so maybe 9 years ago, it was possible to... think about every release in the UK, maybe?
Yeah, probably was. Certainly, well, when I got involved in publishing board games, which was early 2000s, or late 19, I think it was 2000-ish was the first one we did. I'll have a look at the copyright date. But then, in a year, in terms of English language games being published, you wouldn't get into 100. It'd be less than 100 games a year would be published. Probably, in terms of decent, full value, high end games, there might be 50 or 60 or so. And you going to an Essen, there would be half a dozen releases that you're interested in, and no more. Whereas now people have lists as long as their arm of the games they want to go and look at. So yes, there are so many games coming out. How do you differentiate one game from another, and what's going to be good and what's not going to be good? It's very difficult. I'm actually finding I'm buying fewer games now than I used to. And I don't know whether that's because I've already got a lot of games, or because there's so many that you're never quite sure about whether you want to buy games.
But would you say, as a shop owner, your range has increased? As in, are you stocking more SKUs?
Board game wise, I have a fixed amount of space for board games, and we stock board games mostly in ones. So I don't think the number of SKUs we stock has increased. We have to be very selective. I very rarely buying new games on spec for the shop. If customers have said we want X or we want Y, then often I'll get in. I'll go ooh and look at the game, and if it's a game that I'm personally interested in as well, I'll buy an extra copy or two, and we'll have that sitting on the shelves. But quite a lot of games come in, and as a store owner, as a shop owner, board games are something that a lot of people buy online. They go for wherever they can get the absolute cheapest copy of a game. They don't want to wander into a shop and browse and pick up whatever looks good. So in a lot of ways, what you're stocking in a physical store, at least, well, in our physical store anyway. We're not a specialist board game store. We sell board games, so we might have how many board games in stock? Maybe 300 or 400 different titles in stock at any one time. I don't consider that to be a colossal number. You know, if you go to the big boys, they'll have 1,000 plus or more. And the ones that I restock are actually the bread and butter games, the games to get new people interested in gaming. So your Settlers, your Dominion, your Pandemics, Carcassonne, Unlocks, Azul, all the standard intro games, because somebody might walk into the shop and they're interested in a board game, and they're not going to want to be interested in Mythic Battles, Pantheon, or some enormously expensive game. We can get them, and some of them we do stock. We'll pull in games if we think they're interested, and things like Tapestry did quite well for us. The Stonemaier game with all the models in it. Tapestry did quite well. We bought in a few copies of it. Isle of Cats was another one that sold quite a lot. So quite a lot of copies just to ordinary people, and that's great. I have games that I personally love. My favourite board game at the moment is a game called Quartermaster General, which is the whole of World War II in 90 minutes for 6 players. It's just incredible. It actually delivers a really good playable game. I have sold a lot of copies of that in the shop because I'm passionate about it. I make people play it. People like it. They buy it. We sell lots of copies. But yeah, that's the one. Yeah. It's. I think with any store, something that the staff are passionate about is more likely to sell. You need to. J-Fools, you absolutely need to give it a go. It's a brilliant game, and it works 2-player, which is interesting. It's a 6-player game that works really well 2-player.
And J-Fools also had a question that, so just to clarify, you are buying only 1 copy of a game for the shop on the shelf.
Ones and twos for most. We tend not to buy unless I'm really confident in a particular game. I won't buy a case, because if you buy a case, it's you can end up with a load of copies stuck on the shelf. One of the challenges with running a store is cash flow, and if I buy 6 copies of a game and sell 4, I've not actually made any cash. I've made 2 copies of a game sitting on the shelf, and until they sell, I'm not actually in profit. It's an interesting one. Oh, is that the same for card games? Things like Magic and Pokemon.
You know, you're going to sell them. They're kind of time sensitive, so presumably you're buying at least a box.
Well, you have to buy boxes. You can't buy individual packs. You buy them in boxes of 36.
But do you buy boxes of boxes?
Historically, yes, we tended to buy boxes of card games, but only for the card games that are played in our store. I wouldn't go and buy a box of a new card game on spec. Well, we tried it a couple of times and ended up with them sitting around. And you can also find with card games, with some card games, one game that did very well for us for a while and then completely fell flat, and we've got loads of really cheap now, is Destiny. Star Wars Destiny. It was huge. You couldn't get the product for love nor money. We had orders in for more product. Our customers were demanding it. Eventually it arrived, didn't sell because the game had died. And we've got loads of boxes of that sitting around, which is not good. It's a challenge, and if you believe you can sell a whole case of product in a reasonable amount of time, then buying a case makes sense, because you will get an additional discount for buying a case. If you think it's going,
people really want to know more about this, hello Cheap Sheep Games, and presumably if there's a distributor, then it doesn't matter because it's one of this, and that's the beauty of not dealing directly with publishers.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
And JFools, sorry, I will let you respond. JFools also wants to know about something that's a bit more popular, like Wolfgang Warsch's The Mind.
With The Mind, we'll buy the thing about. Okay, so there are a number of distributors in the UK, but there's one big monolithic monster one, which is Asmodee. Asmodee have got quite efficient systems now for the way they manage shops. I can place orders for all sorts of products with Asmodee, including stuff that they've not got in stock at the moment. And when it arrives in their warehouse, it just automatically goes into the Battlefield Hobbies pile. And when the Battlefield Hobbies pile reaches the point at which the Asmodee are willing to ship it to us for free, it ships. And it's not an excessive amount of product. We get an Asmodee order at least once a week, probably twice a week, maybe 3 times a week, depending on what's turning up. With games that remain in stock at Asmodee all the time, I probably wouldn't hold a stock of more than... For a larger board game, I will tend to only hold ones, because one game is one game and it takes up its space on the shelf and it gives me more variety. I'd rather have 10 different games than 2 each of 5 games. And it's a space thing. The shop's quite big, and most people would say it's a huge shop, but we don't just sell board games. We also sell miniatures games, and we sell role-playing games and so on. And miniatures games, the miniatures games we sell, so Games Workshop, Warlord, Battlefront, Plastic Soldier Company, take up a huge amount of space. Something like The Mind, if we sold out of The Mind, I might have 2 copies because it's small. So you don't mind having 2 copies of a small game or 3 copies of a small game. But smaller games, in order to get a case discount, you're buying a dozen rather than 2. It's a juggling mash. It's like a board game. It's quite interesting. It's an economic board game. You're running a game shop. Maybe there's a game in running a game shop, and trying to juggle how actually, there probably is a really good board game in running a game shop.
There's probably a good board game in most things. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
It just takes someone who's both experienced at the subject and also experienced enough to make a good game. Yeah,
and you need one of my. A game I like a lot. It's not my favorite games, but it's a game where the design was quite interesting, and watching the design process happen was really interesting. Is Tinner's Trail, which was a Treefrog game.
I love that.
And the fundamental core to the game. So, right, we're going to waffle off on Martin Wallace now, but Martin is probably the best thematic game designer there is. You go, Martin, I want a game about this. Okay. Martin goes away, reads a few books or a Wikipedia article or something about this, so tin mining in Cornwall, and dilutes out the key facts about tin mining in Cornwall, which was that there were 2 different things that they mined, and they didn't have a massive amount of control over what they were mining. And the deeper the mines went, the more water went into the mines, and the more water in the mines made it harder to get the stuff out. And he thought, right, that's a core situation, and built a game about it. It's quite a simple game, but it's beautiful and elegant. And the switch from the core to what's going on about the game and what came out was really interesting to watch. And I'm sure that if Martin was still in Manchester, I could walk up to him and say, hey, Martin, why don't we do a game about running a game shop? These are the things you need to consider. He'd come up with a mechanism, because it is just an economic game. It's the same as a brass or something else like that. And yeah, you could do a game shop. Easy. Easy.
Yeah, I know that there's a couple of designers, at least a couple watching, so maybe this will spark something. And a quick hello to Yoda, who just popped in. Thank you for joining us. And let's move on. Obviously, people are free to ask questions, comment, follow all that stuff. But let's get to you, your life, and let me ask, what's your earliest memory that you're willing to share?
Earliest memory that I'm willing to share? Blimey. I'll try and think of a memory from before I played games. That's I started playing games very, very young. I'm trying to remember. Actually, earliest memories would be probably going into primary school. I was really excited. I loved primary school. I really liked going to primary school. I liked going to school. I used to go early so I could help the teacher set the classroom up. I was that kind of swotty person. Yeah, that was me. I really liked it. So earliest memories would be wandering off down the road on a nice sunny day to go to school at the age of about 5 or 6, probably. Although I can also remember from primary school getting badly told off for making paper aeroplanes out of toilet paper. That was probably
that's terrible construction material. It's too floppy.
No, it was the hard paper. You know, the crinkly toilet paper, not modern soft toilet paper. We're talking old-fashioned, hard, shiny toilet paper.
I'm unfamiliar with this.
Oh, Google Izal toilet paper. IZAL.
Okay, I will.
It's hard toilet paper. It's lovely stuff. So there you go. Those are 2 memories from primary school that I can remember, and they're from the days before gaming. How about that?
I see a couple of images. It's not so Wikipedia, so I'm maybe not able to show it. But oh wait, no, I thought there was a Wikipedia thing, but just because I want to be careful with what I show. But yeah, oh my, indeed, it is quite the thing.
It is strange stuff.
So how did you say that your earliest memories are of playing games? How did you fall in love with games? What's your earliest games memories?
Probably the earliest game memory will be when I was bought a chess set. I got a chess set from Father Christmas, probably aged about 6 or 7, and I really enjoyed playing chess, learning how to play chess and playing chess. I wasn't very good at it. I enjoyed it, and yeah, there were other games that could be the what was it called? Frustration dice game with a popper bubble in the middle and things like that, where you just clicked on this thing and it rolled a dice inside a captive plastic cube. I mean, they weren't great games. Chess, obviously, is a great game, but I started getting involved in games because I was interested in military history, and I found books in the library by two gentlemen, one by the name of Charles Grant and one by the name of Donald Featherstone, who were the fathers of wargaming, modern wargaming, the fathers of modern wargaming. The original first ever wargaming book's a book written by by someone you have heard of, H.G. Wells. Wrote a book called Little Wars back in 1900 something or other, and maybe 1910, a long time ago. And I did eventually get a copy of Little Wars, but Donald Featherstone and Charles Grant's books were all over not all over. There were lots of them in the libraries, multiple books by each of the 2 authors. And I was interested in military history. I discovered the wargaming books. I'm not entirely sure why I first went to wargaming books, but probably by the age of 9, I'd read every single book about wargaming in the, that's H.G. Wells's Little Wars. You fight your battles with cannons that fire projectiles. So you have the little spring-loaded cannons and you fire them to knock the other guy's soldiers over. It's great stuff. Not the Charles Grants and Donald Featherstone were more proper games with dice and so on. So by the time I was about 9, I'd read every book in the library about wargaming and most of the books in the library about military history. I was passionate about Nelson. Nelson was my hero, and I'd read everything about Nelson and lots about Alexander the Great and the Romans and so on. So, before I even got to secondary school, I was huge into military history and into gaming. But my parents, they wouldn't buy me any war toys. I wasn't allowed war toys. There was a rule. So I didn't have guns and I didn't have bows and arrows. But I think when I was 9 for Christmas, I was bought a wargaming book by, it was a Charles Grant book, but it was a World War II wargaming rules. And that was my Christmas present. Great. And then I was using Airfix model tanks and Airfix figures and fighting battles using those rules. And I was very much a wargamer on my own, at home, maybe playing with one or two of my mates. I had a friend the same age as me who was also interested in the same things as me, possibly because I forced him to be. And then my father, he one of the guys who worked with my dad or for my dad, had set up a wargaming club. And round about the age of 10 or 11, I got taken to this wargaming club, and it was like, wow, isn't this brilliant? All these people playing games with toy soldiers, and aren't they lovely? And they're all painted. Oh, man, amazing. And the first time I went, I ended up commanding the right flank of a Viking army fighting some Romans. Obviously, Vikings always fought Romans because, you know, that's very historical. And we were playing a set of wargaming rules called Wargames Research Group, 3rd edition. I have a copy of Wargames Research 3rd edition, published in 1971. And these are my rules from the first wargaming rules I ever had. And I started off, got involved in wargaming, went and bought myself some ancient era wargaming figures, so Romans. Even bought my first metal wargaming figures, 25mm figures by a company called Hinchliffe Models, who are no longer there. I paid 8 pence per figure for 25mm ancient Romans. 8 pence a figure. Bought 12 of them.
What were they made out of?
12 pence, 12 figures for 96 pence. That's inflation for you.
What were they made out of?
Metal, lead.
I mean, they're not
metal
normally.
Nowadays, they're about £1.50, £2 a figure.
Yeah, wow.
8 pence back then, but that would have probably been 1973. Yeah, maybe 73 or 4. That would have been then. So I started playing war games, and although I walked to the War Games Club, which was sort of 3 or 4 miles away, because I didn't want to spend the money on the bus fare because I could spend that on toy soldiers instead. I did a lot of walking and things like that to save money. The guys at the War Game Club, the older members, were really good. They were. I mean, I was an annoying kid. I was an interested but annoying kid. So by the time I went to secondary school, I was a regular attendee at the War Games Club. Got to secondary school. I was expecting there to be a War Games Club at secondary school, and there wasn't. It was a bit annoying. So in my second year at secondary school, I decided that my school needed a War Games Club.
So you set it up?
So I went to the head teacher, to the deputy head teacher of the school, and I said, what do I need to do to form a War Games Club? And he said, well, you need a teacher and you need a sixth former. Okay, off I went. I press ganged my history teacher, and I went and found myself a sixth former. There was a military modelling club, which is kind of close. So I went to the military modelling club, and I found someone who was a sixth former, and I got him to volunteer to be my sixth former. And I set up the school War Games Club when I was in the second year. So I would have been, what, 12, 13? And the club's still there. The school's still got a War Games Club, which is brilliant. Then I was still wargaming, all sorts of historical wargaming, because there wasn't much in terms of board games and things back then. I mean, a bit. I discovered diplomacy. That was something some of my friends got me into, and I got involved in a number of online diplomacy games, diplomacy fanzines. One of my friends was publishing a Gestetnerd diplomacy fanzine, and I remember going around and helping him collate that and get that posted out.
I want to ask a quick tangent. Yeah. What's the best way to play diplomacy in your opinion? I've never played it. I am wary of playing it with people who aren't ready for it. I know there's some online games going on, but I was also tempted back in February, March last year. I discovered, although obviously never managed to go for obvious reasons, I discovered that there's a London Diplomacy Club, which is quite cool. and then these people meet up once a month to play diplomacy. I was like, yeah, that seems like a good way to do it. Let's play with strangers who know what they're doing, and you don't risk losing your friends.
You can I played quite a bit of face-to-face diplomacy. We get 7 of us together. We'd all be friends, all friends, and we stayed friends even if you stab people in the back and so on. Face-to-face diplomacy works quite well. There are the biggest problem with face-to-face diplomacy is a game with player elimination. So you can end up with people knocked out of the game and hours and hours and hours of game still to go. But as a way to learn the game, it's a good way to learn the game. One interesting variation that I have done at a couple of StabCons is we ran a convention game of diplomacy where the convention starts Friday afternoon. So we do sign-ups Friday afternoon and we start the game at 6 o'clock on Friday evening. So we allocate the countries at 6 o'clock Friday evening. We then do the first 2 years or 4 turns of the game face-to-face on a relatively short turnaround. I think we did about 15-20 minute turnaround turns where you've got 15-20 minutes to talk to people. You get to know who all the players are. And then after those 2 years, you go to 1 move per hour and a half over the weekend. And people can go off and play other games, and you can go and negotiate and do your diplomating as part of the convention, just as an ongoing thing. So effectively, you start the game face-to-face and quite quick, and then you let it flow over the duration of the convention. There was one StabCon where somebody actually ran what he called a bourse or a stock market on the diplomacy game. So we had a convention diplomacy game with the board up in the corner of the room on a notice board, and then people were investing money in the countries to try and make profit by countries going up and down the stock market that was tied to the diplomacy game. Which was quite good fun. Yeah, to learn face-to-face, definitely try some face-to-face games. And if you went to the London Diplomacy Group and you said, hi, I'm new, I've never played diplomacy, I want to learn, can you give me an idea? That would be great. Postal diplomacy is a different thing, but also really good fun. And probably the most amusing story I can do on postal diplomacy was, again, when I was at school. One of the players in the group in the game I was in was a girl, woman now, girl, who I was very good friends with. She wasn't a girlfriend, but we were very good friends. And I was in a maths exam, a maths mock exam, and I'd finished the maths mock exam and I had nothing better to do. I hated checking my answers because I always found it made it worse. So I sat and I wrote a letter to this girl I was playing a diplomacy game with. And I was writing a big long letter, and it's really freezing cold in the gym. I'm here in a maths exam. I've done all I can, blah, 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 blah. And it got into a bit of diplomacy at the end. And my maths teacher was invigilating the maths exam. And as she walked around the exam, she's looking at me writing all this stuff, and then walks past, there's more writing, walks past, more writing. And then she picked up the piece of paper I was writing, took it to the front of the class, front of the exam room, sat down, read it, corrected the spellings in red pen, and gave it me back. So I finished the letter and posted the letter, and yeah.
Did you bother changing to rewriting it, or?
No, I just finished the letter with the teacher's marks on it, the corrections, and posted it. There you go. Probably the most unusual thing that teacher ever saw in a maths exam. So yeah, diplomacy, I was starting to get involved in that at the same time as running the school war games club. But then at my main wargaming club, this guy turned up with this game that was really weird. It didn't have a board, it didn't have miniatures, it had these 3 books that came in a little box. It's called Dungeons and Dragons. And he'd imported Dungeons and Dragons. Aquasilis, how did the maths go? The mock exam was officially the hardest mock exam they'd ever done. They reduced the pass mark for a grade A from 75 to 70, and I got 76. And as the teacher put my mark on my table, she sort of gave me a a bit of a you bad boy, you only just got an A in this because you wrote that letter, and I know you wrote that letter and you shouldn't have done. It was, yeah, quite kind of daggers, really. But yes, I did get an A, so I'm good at maths. That's what I do. Dungeons and Dragons turned up at the War Games Club, and we started playing Dungeons and Dragons. We've been doing something a bit.
Would this be the original Games Workshop import?
No. Before Games Workshop imported it, this was original publishing from the US. This guy had bought it from the US before it even came into the UK.
Wow!
So very, 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 very early Dungeons and Dragons. We had one copy of the rules in the club, and we'd been doing something a little bit like that, a sort of dungeony game, but this kind of was woohoo. Yeah, so I started playing Dungeons and Dragons, and that took over my later teenage years. I was going to there were quite a lot of conventions and events and gaming events where I went to. I can't remember, but I used to go off, age of 14, hop on the train, go somewhere, go to a games convention, come back home. Parents didn't know where I was. Well, they knew I'd gone somewhere, but they had no clue what I was doing. I started coming across board games like Civilization was obviously out there, and then I came across another board game, which is one I've got in my pile of useful things that's next to me, which really caught my attention because it was very, very clever. Which is a game called Apocalypse, or actually Warlord.
What's the Apocalypse system?
Not Apocalypse, Warlord, the original Warlord. This is the game that became Apocalypse.
Nice.
From Games Workshop. And I played that at a wargaming convention, thought it was absolutely brilliant. It uses was D&D more like a wargame in the beginning? Yes, D&D started out as a wargame. It came from there was a set of wargaming rules called Chainmail, which Gary Gygax was using as their club wargaming rules, and then they developed D&D as the heroic, magical side of the chainmail wargame gaming thing, and it very much evolved from a skirmish wargame into where it is now, which is nothing.
Am I right in understanding that? Oh, sorry, there's a really bad echo. Hold on, I'm going to mute you. Just while I'm talking, I'm going to mute you. I hope that's okay. I was going to say, am I right in understanding that a lot of JRPGs were directly inspired by D&D, and that's why there's such a strong connection to leveling up stats like you do with your D&D characters?
Ooh, good question. So D&D was the first that really got noticed among role-playing games, but then a whole mountain of role-playing games came out very, very quickly at or about the same time. So they may well have been being developed at the same kind of time. So you had, in the first wave, you had Dungeons and Dragons, Tunnels and Trolls, Traveller. What other ones were really early ones? RuneQuest was quite early, but not the same. Now, a lot of role-playing games have leveling up, and character development and character progression is a key part to role-playing games. And the leveling up mechanism is a good way of building in that. Is it? I think D&D did it first. But actually, if you look at D&D, RuneQuest, and Traveller, and think of those as probably the first three big games, because they're the first. Chivalry and Sorcery, yeah, that was another one. But D&D, RuneQuest, and Traveller, they're all quite different. D&D is the only one of those three that actually has levels. And Traveller doesn't have any rules in the base game for character improvement during the game.
Wow.
Traveller characters, you roll the character, or you generate the character in the character generation process, and your character might die during character generation. But at the end of character generation, your character is set, and there isn't an official way in the original game to gain any new skills or change anything. So actually, I would say that lots of games that use levels are probably inspired by D&D, but I don't think all the original role-playing games use levels. How about that for controversial?
No, it makes perfect sense. It's a fact. It doesn't seem controversial at all.
Anyway, so where were we? We were talking about conventions, Warlord,
yeah, D&D, and let's move on to your time with university. You've set up this club, and then at some point you become really entrenched in LARP.
Yeah. Okay. So I headed off to university. Found the War Games Club at university. Yay, good, go me. With the sign on the door saying, "Warning: this club can damage your exam results," and it was completely right. It can. Met a load of really good people at university, and my first year at university, I was going to the War Games Club every Saturday, every Sunday, playing at the Liverpool War Games Club, that was, because I was at Liverpool Uni, and then the University War Games Club on the Wednesday nights, as well as playing basketball and being busy and being a first-year student and just living the life and having a great time. But whilst I was at university in my first year, I noticed adverts for this thing called Treasure Trap, which was set up in Cheshire, which isn't that far from Liverpool, and it looked really interesting. And there was an advert in White Dwarf and an advert, I think, in some of the wargaming magazines, and I was really, really curious about it. But yeah, I never quite got round to doing anything about it my first year at university. But what I'm going to reverse a bit slightly, because I'd actually gone to the Manchester University role-playing group before I went to the university proper. So from 16, I was going to the Manchester University War Games Club, or Games Club, and I met some people there who will come into the story very shortly. Well, one of them was the guy who founded my school War Games Club with me, the sixth former, who was at university, and I was playing in his Traveller game at Manchester University. When I went back to Manchester University at the end of my first year, went back to the university club in the summer, I met up again with this rather nice young lady who I'd met playing in the role-playing group, the role-playing game at the university. And she asked me, was I interested in going down to Games Day with her and some people from the Liverpool, from Treasure Trap, basically. I kind of said yes. And I got taken in a minibus down to this castle in Cheshire. We drove through the courtyard. We drove into. I'm really sorry. I've got somebody ringing me. I'm going to have to pause for a second. Can you? Yeah. Can I just mute for a bit and briefly take this phone call? Really sorry, Mr. Neil.
Just looking at. Oh, I'll mute Hammy. There we go. So we can't hear the conversation. Yeah, looking at this castle, it certainly looks like a different era, and I'm hoping that we can discover what was unique, how LARP has evolved. And it's certainly been a lovely conversation with Hammy so far. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. Otherwise, we're going to go through what's a cliffhanger indeed. Let me actually move this so that I'll be able to see Hammy. Yeah, I can see Hammy in the background, and you can't. But yeah, so far we've chatted about so much. Let me do a mid-section recap. We've chatted about, we might still talk about Warfrog and the concept of bad debt, but a bad debt that you actually quite enjoy. We'll talk about conventions. We'll talk about a bit more about retail. Have I done much LARP? I've done a wee bit of Nordic LARP. So with LARP, I think there's commonly three broad styles of LARP. There's the buffer LARP, which is what you see in the photo, where people have fake weapons and then they smack each other. There's the Nordic LARP, which is very small chamber style quite often, and it's dealing more about the one-to-one emotional resonance. of the emotional interactions of grief. Yeah, exactly. Boffer LARP is kind of like live action D&D or a combat orientated thing. Nordic LARP is far more emotionally orientated, and that gives way to things that it very much informed something that I co-designed for the King's College London, which was I keep challenging structures. That's the name of it. It's probably not. Yeah, the sad thing about that is that we playtested it twice. It works brilliantly, and then the actual run through never happened because, yeah, COVID. There is another kind of chamber LARP, which is, for example, Vampire the Masquerade, which is about once a year, or once the idea that there being a whole bunch of vampires, and all these vampires have to keep themselves secret. And we've got James able to chat, I assume. I'm going to unmute you.
Sorry about all that. Yes, live action Dungeons and Dragons. That's what Treasure Trap is. Those people waving rubber swords, that's what we did. That lovely castle that that Bez showed, that is where we used to do our live action Dungeons and Dragons. And if you look on the internet, you can find a sort of aerial view of Peckforton Castle showing you the whole of the castle estate. It's really big. It's beautiful. It's got a courtyard, and if you do a Google for Peckforton Castle, Bez, you should find a very good aerial view of it. Basically, what had happened was some people have come up with the idea of crossing reenactment and role-playing games, and they set up a business. Oh, damn it! Sorry, he's coming back at me. I need to answer it again. Really sorry.
Okay, I am able to show some images from Google, and so you can. Yeah, if people in the UK are interested in LARP, then you can. Whoa, that's a big image. You can absolutely check out something also called. Oh, I'm blanking on the name. Realm. Dave Weatherall is a big part of this, but Empire. That's the one. Empire. Yes. Do you know Empire?
I'm muted. Hello, I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
He's back again. Sorry. I'm going to again.
And we've got people saying, oh. Oh my gosh. But yeah. Okay. And
trying to run a business, sorry.
It's all good. I was just mentioning that if people I know not everyone watching is based in the UK, but if people are based in the UK, I don't know if you've heard of Empire. I've heard really good things of it, although I've not been myself.
Okay, so Dungeons and Dragons started off. Sorry, Treasure Trap was the. That's Peckforton again, isn't it? Yeah, that's the main hall. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And that's a view from a view. It's lovely. It's a wonderful place. It's now a very expensive hotel. Basically, the concept, what was done at Treasure Trap was like Dungeons and Dragons, but for real, with rubber swords. You did dungeon adventures. You went off and fought the bad guys and did quests and gained levels and so on. But it was brilliant, and we did it for 3 years, and I spent nearly every weekend there for 3 years. At the end of 3 years, what happened was the people who'd rented the castle lost the lease for the castle. I think there was some falling out with the owners, and Treasure Trap itself closed. And the people who'd been went back to, they sort of fragmented around the country. One of the guys that was there, or several of the guys, ended up setting up something called, well, Chislehurst Caves. What's it down there? What's the Chislehurst thing? Oh, Labyrinth. Labyrinth, which is a game system, pretty much a straight copy of Treasure Trap, but based in the caves in Chislehurst. Then there were a couple of university societies, the Durham University Treasure Trap Society, the Birmingham University Treasure Trap Society, that kept running their own treasure trap games. Only Fools and Heroes, which is another ex-person from Treasure Trap, was running that. Spirit of Adventure, which was a Manchester-based thing, which were some friends of ours that were running, and they asked us to be involved in, and we weren't sure about. We weren't sure about that because they wanted to do things outside, and we like the idea of indoors. But myself and a couple of friends decided that we were going to run an indoor live action role-playing site. And one of the two friends, his father had a mill where they turned old clothes into rags, and we used the downstairs of this mill as a dungeon area, and we built walls and adjustable partition walls. We only had 4 or 5 rooms, but we were able to make adventure spaces and dungeon spaces where we could do adventures downstairs, linear D&D style adventures downstairs in there. And that worked okay, and we invented our own game system. We came up with a system which we called Realm. Realm was a combination of level-based, skill-based. It was a bit unusual, and the rule book was huge. It was about 250, 300 pages thick, stupidly thick. And we did okay to start with, and then we moved. We actually took on a commercial premises. I think we had 7,500, 8,000 square feet or more of warehouse space, which
that
had
sounds
been...
like... I should firstly give a quick belated hello to Zihark-sama. Thank you for dropping in. But 200, and we're just talking about LARPs, and I'll recap everything at the end. But 200 pages, is that something that the players were expected to read before?
They knew their bits. They knew their bits. I mean, the rules were a detailed codification of the way the game worked. Most of the game, you don't need to know the rules. But a lot of the rules would be about skills and magic and so on. We had 5 different kinds of magic in Realm, just to be different. We had everything in Realm was in 7s. So we had the concept of 7 spheres of study, which some people might think are character classes. But every time you gained a level in Realm, you chose which sphere that level came from. So you could be a level 7 fighter, physical, or you could be a level 7 normalist, priest, or you could be 3 of one and 4 of another, or so. And then there were 7 spheres of study, 5 of which were magical. So a lot of the rules were explaining all the different types of magic, which was there. You learn them. It's a lot of rules, but nowadays, no, modern LARP systems don't have anywhere near that many rules. It's all got a lot simpler. Yeah, we built a dungeon area, or 2 dungeon areas in this mill, which was under an old set of sewing rails. They'd had sewing machines in a mill, and there was a rail 7 foot off the ground, a big grid of scaffold, and we were able to hang wooden boards from that, tie them all together, and make a fairly substantial area. It was about 2,500, 3,000 square feet of dungeon space. And we had a tavern area, and people could sleep there, and we would get 50 to 80 people over there over a weekend playing games for a year or so. And that went okay until the council decided that they didn't want us there anymore. And effectively, we were forced to close down by the council, who were redeveloping the area into something modern and more normal and more businessy. So that realm ceased, but what happened was we got, like when Treasure Trap split, we got lots of splinter groups, people who'd been to Realm and would continue playing the Realm system. 1 lot in Yorkshire, 1 lot in Lancashire, 1 lot in near Liverpool, 1 lot in Sheffield, and so on, which is also Yorkshire. But and there was a lot down in London as well. So we'd go around and go to games at their various little venues, but that was all done outdoors. What then started to happen is there was a move to fest-style LARP events, which is people gathering together in a field, camping field, like a festival, but it's a LARP. And the Chislehurst people set up their LARP thing, and hang on, there's the Gathering, which is one of the big events. The Gathering went for a while, and then that fractured, and you got the Gathering and Renewal. And the Renewal, which is Curious Pastimes, is mostly people who were ex-Realm, and the Gathering was originally mostly people who were ex-Treasure Trap or Spirit of Adventure. Empire, which you mentioned about 15 minutes ago, is another very serious, really, really good festival LARP system. It's slightly different to the other two. It's less combat focused, although you still get big battles. I've been to Empire a couple of times. It's amazing, but I'm old and fat past it. And for me, LARP was almost a contact sport. I liked the physical aspect of it. When I've gone back to LARPs more recently, I've discovered that my body isn't up to it anymore, and I try and act like a 20-year-old, and I'm not, and I pay for it quite badly the day after. So I can still appreciate the event. I mean, the Empire I went to, it was almost like walking into a campsite from Game of Thrones. The main gaming area is all in character tents, everybody costumed, everything done up, no modern stuff at all, and it is like walking through a city of tents. It's brilliant.
I know Empire partially because of Dave Weatherall, who's done quite a bit of Nordic LARP and has been published by Gibson's Games, so is not just a self-published designer, but also within Empire plays this character that has the Guild of Good Games, which is an in-LARP game designer making these games that a lot of the early ones were, I'm going to be honest, kind of knockoffs of real-life games, but rethemed around the Empire setting, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So here's
I think I've actually played one of the... When I was at Empire, I ended up playing Picomino, but not Picomino, but a Viking-themed version of Picomino in a bar in one of the places in the tent village. It's just cool. It's cool, yeah.
And Dave's actually got into the point where, there's a Kickstarter up now, which is, it's vaguely like double, except not really, because you're putting these runes together. Anyway, it's kind of, it's its own game, if you know what I mean, which is really cool that there's original games being designed just for the LARPers, essentially, which is boggles the mind. And people spend so much money and time and effort on their costumes.
LARP now compared to LARP, the photos you showed from Treasure Trap, people might think, oh, well, that looks cool. That looks like nice costume. You want to dig up some photos from Empire. Dig up photos of the Empire War Rhino. They made a physical a rhino that an orc could ride on the battlefield. So it's like a metal frame that people underneath would carry, but it's done out as a war rhino, and it's the center of the orc battle line. It's just incredible stuff. The visuals, it's film quality. Some of the stuff you wouldn't know you are in a game. It's just brilliant. The whole visuals of the thing. Yeah, LARP's great. Loved it. Did it for a while, and then moved away from it. But it consumed probably the first half of my 20s, and then I ended up getting a job. The way you do. And what I found with gaming is there's always been multiple kinds of games I've been playing. So role-playing games and war games, or LARP and role-playing games, or LARP and war games, or board games and war games. In my 20s, late 20s, I moved back to strategy war games. I'd always been, well, not always, from probably about the age of 11 or 12, I've been into the big hex war games, the Third Reich and things like that, Battle of Waterloo games. And I in probably at about 25, 26, I came across another game I've got a fish rep of because it's significant. This one. This is a seriously good game if you like your hex games. It only takes a week to play. Only a week. I mean,
how many hours do you need to spend each day?
That's full time. A week full time. You're starting at 9 in the morning, finishing about 7 at night. and it still takes a week to play. About 100 hours. In that period of my life, I had very little money and not a lot, and lots of holidays. Had a job. Put this up again. World in Flames.
Yeah, I think it's more what a weekend, as Yoda says, and people complain about Twilight's Imperium 4.
So I had a job working for the local council, and I was working lots of hours because I was doing all the IT stuff. And I got flexi time and 27 days holiday a year. And the flexi time was such that I could have another 13 days holiday a year because I worked more than enough hours to get the time off on flexi time. So I could have 40 days holiday a year. And I had no money to spend to go on holidays. But I had a number of friends who were all interested in playing Hex War games and things. We used to have a copy of World in Flames permanently set up on my gaming table at home. And we'd play that one night a week, and it would take us about 6 months to play a full game. But then 1, 2, 3 weeks a year, we'd pick someone's house, we'd go there, we'd all stay at someone's house for a week, having taken a week off work, set the game up on the Friday night, play the game Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and maybe finish sometime the following weekend. So although the game takes 100 or so hours to play, I've managed to play it all the way through about 25 times, maybe 30 times. And it was the early days of internet communication about games. It was all in mailing lists rather than news groups or anything like that. But there was a mailing list that I got involved in, and we would write up battle reports or after action reports as to what was going on our games, and a really good community built up on the back of that. And as a result of that, I got to be quite good friends with the designer of the game, a guy called Harry Rowland, who did Empires in Arms and Seven Ages and obviously World in Flames and a couple of other things. I actually ended up meeting him. I've been to his house in Australia and so on. But because of that, I ended up leading one of the playtest groups for the final edition of that game. And that was probably the first time I got involved in developing games in terms of a board game thing. But that was as a sort of serious playtester. And we managed to play the game all the way through over a 7-day period, a week period, with us feeding back every night. We were doing reports and getting updates back from the designer and making adjustments as we were going along. It's really hard when the game takes 100 hours. You just have to keep pushing on and go through it. But we did complete a full game with a number of revisions during the game as we went through, and contributed towards the final thing of that game. So that's the first time I got involved in game development and testing. I've completely missed out StabCon. We haven't really had StabCon yet, but we have. Not really. That starts in the 1990s. Yeah, so there you go. I've done that. I'm not doing a tabletop wargaming. I'm just doing Hex gaming. I'm doing role-playing games, and I've occasionally doing LARPing. Next phase in my life, I finally went to a job where I wasn't working every weekend. Yay! I got a new job. I've got weekends. What can I do my weekends? I went back to wargaming. I went back to tabletop miniatures. Slightly tied in with StabCons. So, because I probably better mention StabCon. When I was 16, one of the conventions I went to was a convention called StabCon, which was run by a guy called Dave Waring in Manchester at a University Hall of Residence. Really enjoyed it. I went to every StabCon that Dave ran. He ran about 7 in the late 70s, early to mid 80s, whilst he was at university. When he left university, he ran 1 or 2 more. And the last one he ran, I think, was about 88 or 89. And at that, I got to play some tabletop wargaming again. Really enjoyed it. And that game, that was a game called DBA, De Bellis Antiquitatis, boring Latin names as all. That led to me going back into tabletop miniatures wargaming again. And for probably the next 10 years, tabletop miniatures wargaming was one of my 2 main passions. But board games sneak in as well. Because by the late 80s, we're starting to get a few more what I'd call modern games. Not that many, but there's a few starting to appear. Dave Waring stopped running StabCon, which was sad. And then we went to a convention in Cambridge called Conjunction, which was a role-playing and board games convention run by the British Role-Playing Society. And Michelle and I enjoyed ourselves. I never really actually mentioned, after Treasure Trap, Michelle and I, couple, been together 30-odd years, all because I was flying a spaceship when I was 16. It's a long and complicated story, but we'll not worry about that. We're still together. We still run StabCon. We still do everything. StabCon, what we decided after being to this convention in Cambridge...
It's a very aggressive name.
What? StabCon?
Yeah. I know it's an acronym.
No,
I understand
it's not an acronym. No, it's about stabbing. StabCon started out as a diplomacy and Dungeons and Dragons convention, the very first one. The two main games being played were diplomacy and Dungeons and Dragons. There was a diplomacy tournament and there was a Dungeons and Dragons.
It was Stockport, sorry.
No. Diplomacy convention and a Dungeons and Dragons competition. And there were prizes for each of those. One of the prizes at the event was for the best stab in a game. Now, there's a term in diplomacy to stab someone. When you're playing a game of diplomacy and you turn on your ally in a spectacular way, you know, you've been working happily together and helping each other and doing a really, really good job of dominating the world, and then you just turn on your ally and stab them in the back. That's a stab. And there was a prize at the first StabCon for the best stab. So stab was to do with stab for board games, for diplomacy and for D&D-ish, because you stab things in D&D. It is
At
to
least
do
with setting expectations then.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we just nicked the name because we like the name, and it had run a number of times before. We initially, the very first StabCon we ran, we got about 60 people. How does the D&D competition work? Yeah, I don't really understand that either. It's a very weird thing. They do have them. They used to have them at Gen Con as well. There were points awarded for doing things. I don't really know.
The Dungeon Master gives points for roleplay, and people give points for the Dungeon Master, or
you get points for achieving this, that, and the other. Yeah, I don't know. The D&D convention, the D&D competition at the first StabCon was actually won by one of the monsters. Because the only thing that came out of any of the competition dungeons alive was a orc that had been charm-personed by one of the wizards in one of the parties, and the orc had survived and everybody else had died. So the orc won the competition.
Wow.
It's true. It's a legend. It's true. Yeah, we ran StabCon early 90s. We got 60 or 70 people turning up. Lots of them were our friends, and it grew from there on word of mouth. StabCon is an event that advertises purely on word of mouth. We don't try and push membership because A, capacity, and B, it would change the nature of the event. It's almost like a club that meets twice a year, or a group of friends that get together twice a year. We don't mind new people coming. It's great. We're lovely to see new people, but we don't actively push to get new people, because at any one StabCon now, we're up to 300 attendance, or we were pre-lockdown, and we've kind of capped it at that. We did briefly consider actually hard limiting it, but we've managed to dissuade people from coming enough that we've not run out of space at the venue. It's a juggling game.
A very interesting issue, because one of my favorite conventions, although I'm biased because it's, I believe, the only one I've been to and I've not done any work. Like, I've not been a publisher, I've not been a volunteer, I've not been working as a designer, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And the only convention that's true of is Bastion. But also, even if...
That's the North Wales one, isn't it?
Yeah, Conway. Yeah. And it's a lovely thing. And the truth is, I think that it's not about the specific things. It's about the community that develops. It's about the fact that there is, for me, I think there's a hard cap of like 60 people, because that's how many people can fit into this youth hostel.
Yeah.
And I would, yeah, I feel like there's something nice about these smaller conventions where you can actually get to know everyone by the end of the weekend. I think for me, 300 people, I'm unlikely to get to know everyone by the end of the weekend.
You won't know everyone at 300. I mean, StabCon the 300 it's comfortable, but it's quite big now, 300. I mean, we were 150 at the old venue. We moved to a new venue, which is now full at 300. Ooh, stretching, jiggle and wiggle. Important things.
Yep. Stream Elements reminds me every 37 minutes.
Anyway, I diverged. We were going through. So I started wargaming again, tabletop wargaming, in the 90s.
You became a convention organizer.
Yeah, I like it. And yeah, well, I do that as well. Yeah. I got absolutely addicted to this new war game, this game called Diabolus Multitudinous, to the point of 20 tournaments a year I was attending. I attended tournaments all over the world. I kind of set myself, when I first started playing it, I set myself an objective to get to be ranked in the top 100 players in the country. And then when I did that, it had to be the top 50. And then when I did that, it had to be the top 20. And then it the top 10. And then it was to win an event. And then it was to get into the top 5. And then I won an event. And then it was to win the World Championships. And I set myself those titles. And I focused on it for 12 years. And I did it in the end. And it was great fun. And I've got wargaming friends all over the world on the back of that. I've played on 4 continents. 3 continents. Yeah. Europe, Asia, and America. Africa. 4 continents. I played on 4 continents, and I ended up being the president of the International Wargaming Federation, which was an organization that ran a World Championships every year. They actually did a proper World Championships where they moved it around from country to country each year. And there were rules about not being in the same continent 2 years in a row, and not being in the same hemisphere more than 2 years out of 3, and that kind of stuff. It's great fun. So I've been to all sorts of fun places just to play games, not on holiday, honest. While I was doing that, yeah, bigger tables, more toys, but that's the principle. Yeah, that's DBA. Oh, yeah, more DBA. Deadly boring maneuvers is the DBM thing. If you look at the International Wargaming Federation, I think they've still got a web page. But
and those are a few of the images that are copyright free up on BoardGame Geek, which is very nice.
Whilst I was doing all the wargaming, my career moved on. I ended up getting made redundant, which is the best thing ever happened. Having got made redundant, I was looking for a new job anyway. I walked straight from a job into a contract. It was around about the year 2000 stuff. I got a contract with Barclays Bank, which was great. Stayed there for a very long time, made a decent amount of money. And while I was working at Barclays, because that period, StabCon, Manchester gamers, game designers, this is where I met Martin Wallace. Martin lived in Manchester. Martin came to StabCon. Cool. And I gradually got to know Martin, and then got involved in testing and helping out on some of his games. And there was a Manchester board games group that met in a pub in Manchester on Saturdays, and I'd go there, drink beer, play games. And we take the Michael out of Martin's game designs. The record being one game where we completely redesigned the game 3 times in the first 2 turns. That game never saw the light of day. But we could see that he had some brilliant ideas, and some of the games he designed were great. He was then I got invited. He asked me, was I interested in going to Essen, and I got the option to go over to Essen along with Warfrog and Martin. And this would be the year that he released a game called Mordred, the original white box version of Mordred, not the reprint with the nice wooden pieces and so on. So a Martin Wallace white box game, if you've never seen one, is incredibly plain. Photocopy sheets of paper, plastic playing pieces, and production quality makes most people's prototypes nowadays look like really good games. and he was selling these at the Essen Game Fair, and he was selling them for quite a lot of money. He would probably sell 100 copies of a game at €25 for a plain white box with some photocopied labels on them and so on, because he was trying to get his designs known and so on. And we, after this Essen, we went to Essen with Mordred, which is a great game. He sold all his Mordreds, and we were trying to persuade Martin that he needed to step up and get involved and do games, you know, do something properly and actually become a proper game designer. And we were trying to get him to go to the level of doing something as the same quality as a Winsome game. I don't know if you've seen a Winsome game, but they're not much better quality. They're still a bit better. That's the nice shiny reprint of Mordred. That's the proper version.
So I've put a wee link if people want to check. So I guess we're in for checking out what the very original version looks like. This, out of all the pictures on Board Game Geek, is the only one that was allowed to be used for commercial purposes, which is the license that I usually look for.
Back again.
For safety.
I don't have a white box Mordred. I have got a white box game. This is a white box Iroquois. Ooh. Okay, so you've got a plain white box with sticker labels on, and then inside the box you get a bag of plastic bits, a bag of cubes, you might get some dice. This is better than Mordred because the map paper is actually covered in sticky back plastic. That's better quality than Mordred originally came out as. Okay, we talked to Martin. We took myself and some friends who,
and it was selling for good money because people appreciated the design.
Yes, yeah, you were paying for the design, and we would sell out. We sold 100 copies at 25 or thereabouts at €25. Myself and some of the other guys that went with Martin, we had a bit of money. Not colossal amounts of money, but we had some money, and we were offering to put the funds in to let him do proper production quality. That idea kind of sat in his head, and then about 6 months later, when I'd moved, I was now fully embedded in contracting. Martin approached me and said, "Are you interested in doing something proper, really proper?" And was talking about investing 5 figures, proper money, to do a full print run of a quality game. And that game is actually this one, which I do have, Empires of the Ancient World, which is a proper German game in a nice printed box with a mounted board and wooden
all the things that you take for granted.
Yeah, cards, printed cards. Ooh, go that way, get it going back. And yeah, all the stuff you take totally for granted now. But in 2001, when we released this, I think we were about the only English publisher publishing to anything like this level at the Essen Game Fair. And we went in, we produced 3,000 copies of that game. And I funded 3,000. We did 4,000 copies of a game called Way Out West, which somebody else put the money up for. And I ended up taking over the financial side of running Warfrog for a few years. And the idea being the following year, we had another game. We were doing one game, going to do 2 games first year, and then 1 game a year every year after that. And at the end of the second year, going into the second year, I had to put a little bit more money in to get the next game printed, which was Liberté.
Mm.
And the following year, we got enough cash from selling the product that we already had. The Empires we still had stock of, Liberté we had stock of, but we had enough money to publish the game the next year. The next year we did a game called Age of Steam. Might have heard of that one. It's kind of done quite well. That was the first game we sold out the 3,000 in 12 months. And then the next year, I think we did Princes of the Renaissance, sold out 3,000 in 6 months. Then Struggle of Empires, and we reprinted Age of Steam. And we got the business to the point where we were selling enough games each year to pay for going to Essen, pay for the stand, and to pay for the next game being printed. Martin was getting some money out of the company. I had an agreement with Martin where we basically said we'd split the profit 50-50, which sounded, when we set it up, to be a fair deal. That actually caused some real challenges towards the end. I can't remember which game it was. It was either Struggle or the game after Struggle. That was the last game that I was involved in with Warfrog in that role. And what had happened was that over the years, the company had grown. We'd been starting to get more money, and it was turning into a business. And we came to the conclusion that the friends that we'd got coming along, we had friends coming along, paying their own way and volunteering to help on our stand. They enjoyed it, but they were working for us for free. And we decided that one year we'd pay their air flights. And the next year we said, well, we'll tell you what, we won't pay your air flights, we'll pay a hotel, because that's more. And we could have afforded to pay the hotel and the air flights of everybody working on the stand. They all got free games. They got extra games. We had a swap deal with other publishers. So we ended up with a mountain of swag, and we did a thing for everybody who'd worked on the stand where you got raffle tickets, and you could choose from the pile of games that we got in the swag, and each year you got some nice goodies.
I do a very similar thing.
All good, all great fun, really enjoyable. But we got to the point where we could afford to pay the flight and the hotel. But there's a psychological thing where if you're paying somebody's flight and the hotel, that switches their relationship to them being almost an employee. And there was some psychology going on. I mean, the guys that were helping out were reasonably well off, all had decent jobs, and they were doing it because they wanted to, not because they had to. And I just came away from the Essen. We'd had a fantastic Essen. We'd sold out. We'd got all the reprints had sold and so on. It was wonderful, everything brilliant. And I felt miserable, utterly miserable at the end of that show. Probably the most miserable I've ever felt, because there was this sour feeling about the way everything was working, and my friends were stopping being friends, felt like they were stopping being friends and so on. And we had to have a big thing. And long and short, I stepped away from Warfrog because I was getting 50% of this profit. It's like, I'm getting all this money for effectively nothing. Well, it's like, okay, it's for the work I've done in the past few years. And actually, the good news is, and it might sound bizarre, we sold a load of copies of Age of Steam to an American company, over 1,000 units. And I virtually never got paid anything for them. So I was still taking a risk, and that made me feel massively better. The fact I didn't get paid all the money for those games cost me a load of money, but it did prove that I was still taking a risk.
I mean, I feel like this is something that it's such an interesting question about how money changes things.
It does.
And I would, not today, but I would love to chat to you for like even a couple of hours about how, you know, when you start paying people, presumably they're having less fun, and, you know, they're not coming to it with the same enthusiasm. They feel like now they are obligated to do certain bits.
The volunteer economy, isn't it? The volunteers are crucial to making this hobby work. You know, people don't get paid for playtesting, but do it because they love it. You know, the Games Expo volunteers. There is actually, I think, a worthy discussion. You probably want several people involved around how volunteering works and how volunteering enriches the hobby, because it does. The volunteers, the people, are what make this hobby. The games are the focus, but the people are the important bit. And there was something I noticed at the Games Expo a few years ago. I was sitting. How were we involved that year? I don't know how involved I was that year, but I think I just had a stand, and I was sitting there with my current business partner. We were sitting having a beer and just lapping up the atmosphere of the place. And I came up with the line, "Nerds with attitude." And you've got all these people who are really quite strange. We're all a bit odd and special, but everybody's got so much confidence. And in the environment of the expo, it all just comes out, and it's just beautiful. It's wonderful. It's really nice and really special. And maybe these people wouldn't have that much confidence in a normal street environment or a normal situation, but when everybody's with other people of a like ilk, it's just great. I love it. Absolutely love it. So yeah, involved in Warfrog, publishing games, still doing war games.
And then you decided to take a break because it was just
it was
affecting you negatively emotionally.
Yeah, it was emotional reasons and dealing with the friends thing. And I stepped away for a while. Martin continued running Warfrog for a bit, and then decided he was going to do Treefrog. And he approached me, was I interested in getting involved in Treefrog from the start? And I said no, on principle, because I didn't want to. I like Martin. I know he's a brilliant game designer. He's a rubbish businessman. And I figured he probably did need some help, but I didn't want to. I didn't want to because I didn't want it to be seen as Warfrog again. I wanted it to be seen as something different. And he did that for a year or so and got it into a bit of, it wasn't going as well as it could have done. It was selling games. But when we then ended up at the point where I was actually, my contracts had finished and I was at a bit of a loose end. And I did actually get back involved full time as a director of Treefrog, getting it back straight, getting it doing more games, doing bigger print runs and pushing on. So there was a period of Treefrog probably up to about 2011 or so when there was a year and a half that I was involved with Treefrog full on. And I think we got it to a fairly decent place, but then Martin decided to move to New Zealand. And we agreed to split up, and he went away. So that was cool. And Treefrog's now headed off. Martin's still designing games, although not publishing anymore. I think he's realised that he's not that good at handling the logistics and that side of it. He's great at the art. He's great at the design. He's great at the contacts. But he struggled.
I think it was Essen 2018 or 19 that I saw this Wallace Designs logo, and I said, "Oh, are you publishing again?" And Martin said, "Oh no, I thought I might, but then I decided I'm better off not publishing. But I thought I'll keep the logo as a sort of brand of me as a designer, which seems absolutely like a perfectly good thing to do."
He is such a good game designer. I mean, he really is incredible as a game designer. Not all his games are absolutely perfect. You know, occasionally you come across the Halifax Hammer or whatever in A Few Acres of Snow if you try hard.
I deliberately didn't look it up what the broken strategy was, and then I accidentally discovered it the first time I played. But it feels like it's still a quality game. There's still so much good in there, even though there might be, okay, this is one strategy that you pretty much employ. There's still variance in exactly how you employ that strategy,
and there are ways to stop it as well.
Mm-hmm.
There are ways to stop it. It's not totally broken, but it's. I think part of the problem with that game is it got played so many times that it's challenging, but great game. So yeah, I stopped being directly involved with Martin around about then. I'm still running StabCon. I'm still what else am I doing games wise at that point?
Can I ask you very quickly, because before we started recording, you said that you were happy to talk about a bad debt that you were happy to have.
Oh, well, that's this Age of Steam order.
Okay.
That's the Age of Steam. So yeah, that was the when I left the original Warfrog, I had and we had this thing where I was getting half the profit, Martin was getting half the profit. I'm rich, Martin wasn't. Well, I'm not rich. I'm not badly off, should we say? But as far as everybody's concerned, you know, I wasn't badly off. And at that point, it was 1,200 copies of a game with a retail price of £35 that I didn't get paid distributor price for. So okay, not quite as much as that, but still a fairly big chunk of money. And what had always happened with our American supplier is that we've been very kind. We'd let them have the games, and they paid us before the following Essen. So they'd effectively had nearly 12 months credit from us on that product. But we didn't need the money until the next Essen. And when that game went out, and they were desperate for the game, we would have the reprint, We sent them the reprint, and they never paid the bill. Well, we had a discussion. I agreed. They agreed to pay X per month. They paid me 1 month of the monthly repayments. So I am out of pocket probably over £10,000 on that.
So has this company gone defunct at this point? Or
yeah, I'm never going to get it back. Bad debt. But it's money I never had. It's not money that. There's a difference between losing money that you've had and not getting money that you should have.
I can sort of understand that. You weren't, ultimately what it comes down to is you weren't relying on this money to pay your way in life.
No, not so.
And so that's kind of what allowed you to be like, yeah, this is hopefully going to turn things around and maybe it helps.
Yeah, my involvement in gaming has only ever been it is the core of my life, but it's not what keeps me alive. It's not what feeds me. It's not what buys my house and so on. That's working with computers and doing IT stuff. And nowadays that's working with exhibitions and events, which is where I've ended up in. We kind of ran about the time I came out of Treefrog. I got involved in the business I'm currently involved in, which is an exhibition and events management company. I started out just doing the IT, doing a little bit of the business side of it, not working full time and still doing some contract work. And gradually, as that business grew, my commitment to it became larger. And yeah, we do stuff for big corporates like banks and companies that make engines, or companies that make electric cars, or components for driverless vehicles, or sell houses, and all sorts of stuff like that. We work with all sorts of different things. It's really interesting. We do different stuff all over the world for all sorts of different people. And a number of years ago, I saw a post from a guy by the name of Richard Denning, who'd been to the UK, been to the book show down in London, and took a photo of the book show from above saying, "Isn't this fantastic? Wouldn't it be great if the Games Expo looked like this?" And I sent him a private message on Facebook saying, "If only you knew somebody that ran an exhibition company." And yeah, so we talked to Richard, and gradually over the past number of years, we've got more and more involved in helping out with the Games Expo. Initially, really just on an advice and talk to them point of view, but in the last few years, certainly since they moved into the NEC, we've had some sort of involvement from a business, my exhibition business.
So were you actually involved right at the start, around the turn of the century, when it's launched?
I went to the second ever Games Expo, didn't go to the first one. I was involved as an event organizer. My wargaming tournament stuff, I was running wargaming tournaments at the Games Expo in the Masons place, and I was working with Treefrog and exhibiting there as well. So there was one Games Expo where I was running a trade stand, running a tournament, going around and doing. Oh, it was mad! It was mad. So, and also Richard and Tony and the other Games Expo people, we actually met them before they ran the first ever Games Expo. They came over to Essen, and we met them in the bar next to our hotel in Essen when we were running Warfrog. Warfrog was the big UK manufacturer, so we had a chat with them at that point. So I've known them from before the Games Expo first started, but I didn't get involved in the first Games Expo. We only started getting involved in the Expo from an event point of view, really, once we started exhibiting with Battlefield Hobbies. No, I lie. We built a stand for Plastic Soldier Company. So I know Will, who runs Plastic Soldier Company, quite well. And when Will was doing his first Kickstarter for the Great War, my graphic design business got involved with Will doing the graphic design on the game, because Will asked me, do I know any graphic designers? So I happen to own a company that does it. Would you be interested? Oh, all right. We then designed them what we'd call a proper exhibition stand, a low-end proper exhibition stand. So they had a stand for the thing which looked a bit like World War I trenches. So there was a raised platform, but they had packing cases, with the gaming tables on them. We had sandbags along the back wall. We had an image of the battlefield, barbed wire along the top of the back of the stand, and so on. And we actually made them what you'd consider a proper exhibition stand. It was probably one of the first stands at the expo that had much money spent on it as a stand, rather than just a few trestle tables and a couple of pop-ups. We did that the year before the expo moved into the NEC, and then NEC Hall 1, we built a proper stand for battlefield hobbies, to show the kind of thing, to show the kind of things that can be done and how you can make things relatively low budget. And we've done work with a number of exhibitors at the show. So things like the Catan stand is a stand that we build. We did the Night Models stand last year, well, in 2019 rather. And we do things for the Games Expo themselves. So the dice at the door, you know, the tumbling dice that are coming out of the cup, if you remember that.
Oh yes, yes.
Yeah,
it's a big statue.
We came up. They wanted something a bit unusual as a photo opportunity at the entrance, and they said, "What about dice coming out of dice cup?" And we worked out a way to do it, and we built them the dice. We build boring stuff like partition walls and organise the humpers and shifters now. So over time, our business involvement in that has become more and more, because it's becoming more and more of a.
Wait a minute. So the contractors that I, as an exhibitor, pay to set up the partition walls, that's run by you?
Not right. Last time round, that was sourced by us. No, that was sourced by the Games Expo. Next time round, yes. Last time round, no.
Okay.
We're gradually, we can offer more things. So the partition walling and things is stuff that will be done by one of our businesses for the next Games Expo, we believe. So
and I'll let you finish, and then we've got a couple of questions. And we'll wrap up.
We've waffled on, and yeah, how many businesses do you run at one time? At the moment, I am a director of. I haven't even mentioned my game shop. Periscope.
You did right at the start, briefly.
Yeah, Periscope, Sonar, Torpedo, Nautilus, the Neil Agency, Battlefield. Six businesses I'm a director of. Really, it's two. There's a group of businesses that run exhibitions and events, but for variously complicated reasons, it's split into multiple companies. And then there's Battlefield Hobbies, which is technically part of the group, but it's an independent store. Yeah, so 6 businesses, lots. You were about to say something.
I was about to move on and ask, firstly, how has the last year been? You don't need to delve into everything, just generally.
From a point of view of a business that lives in live events, absolutely awful. There you go. We've not actually done any event work on site for over a year. Our turnover's down by a lot, unsurprisingly. What we've done is pivoted, like everybody has to. We've done some work with regards to filming, and we've set up a film studio. We do filming for clients, which is for virtual events. We've increased the amount of work we do with storage. We've got a big warehouse, we store stuff. The game shop hasn't done too badly. The game shop did really well in April when lockdown had first come in and everybody wanted to buy something so that they could do stuff while they couldn't go out. It calmed down a bit in May and June because people had already bought all the stuff they wanted in April. And then once we started to be able to open up the game shop again for people to come and play games with rule of 6 and things like that, it gradually picked back up. And then it all fell off a cliff again around about Christmas, January. And now people are able to come back in the shop again. It's starting to pick up again. But the games shop we've got is a shop that's all about people coming in to play games. We've got enough space for 21 6-foot by 4-foot gaming tables as a normal gaming space. In rule of 6 restrictions.
126 people.
Potentially, yes. Yeah, you can get 100 people in, no problem at all. But not we work on sort of 42 people playing 2 people to a 6x4 wargaming table, but we've got 100 or so chairs. So yes, we can have 100 people in there. We've had charity game events with 100 people in the space. It does fit. It's cozy at 100 people, but and the shop was in the past 8 refrigerated container trucks that have been knocked together into a giant fridge, and it's a quarter of its retail, 3/4 of its gaming. It's done okay over the last year. It's not done great. It's not done bad. But has the last year been good? Would I want to do the last year again? No, absolutely no way. But that's because of the exhibition things. It's not a games cafe. No, it's just a games playing space. Cafe would involve people that can serve food and things. So we don't do that.
So what's the business model? Because normally in these kinds of places, it's okay. So do you charge per time or per space or?
Yeah, gaming space, we charge £2.50 per person for a gaming session, which would be an evening, a morning or an afternoon. So somebody comes in and plays. I mean,
That's incredibly reasonable.
Yeah. Does it make a huge amount of money? Not really. But
I'm surprised you're able to turn a profit based on.
We sell quite a lot. We sell quite a lot of product as well. You know, we're primarily a retail outlet that has a lot of gaming space. If the gaming space was full at a weekend, you can make a fair amount of stuff. Also, it's on the same premises as our other businesses, so the rent side of it is a bit complicated. Could you run a high street store with that much space on a normal high street? I don't think you could. I think you'd really struggle. But that said, in a city, places like Fanboy 3 in Manchester, they've got probably a similar space to us, and they do okay. But they're in a city. We're in a little town. We're in a little town, and that's a big difference. You know, our footfall's much lower. The games business came about as an aside. It wasn't a deliberate plan. My business partner and I had always thought we'd kind of want to do that. Actually, there's a video with my business partner talking about his gaming background and a walk round of the shop, which I think I sent you a link for. UK Games Expo,
yes, Twitch
feed. If you do Twitch and Games Expo, Twitch Battlefield Hobbies, that might be a link worth putting in. But yeah, he and I had always wanted to do a game shop at some point, and then we had a situation where we won a contract for storing all the event stuff for a major bank, and we needed a new building, new premises, and we couldn't. The only premises we could find were too big. And because of where they were, we ended up in this situation where we had spare space and spare manpower, and we decided to take advantage of that and open a game shop. It's a bit strange, but yeah.
And that's the link. I know on Twitch and Facebook the comments will stay up. For YouTube, I'll hopefully remember to add it to the bottom for the walk around that Hammy has just mentioned. We've got one question from the audience. I want to be mindful of your time. I know we've. I'm
okay. No, I got interrupted for the important, urgent things, so that's fine.
Okay, so one question from the audience and a question from me. Firstly, what do you think is in the near future for exhibitions in general?
That's a biggie. It's a fairly huge one.
Alex asking all the easy questions.
Oh yeah,
that's sarcasm.
Hopefully. If things relax as of,
and actually, you know what? Can I ask you? Do you think UK Games Expo will run in 2021?
Yes, I do.
Do you?
Yes, I think so.
As an exhibitor, I'm still trying to work out what's going on. I know that Richard's been very upfront saying that we just don't know what's happening at all, and
they can't. We can't know for certain. I cannot be absolutely certain because we don't know for sure. But if things relax, as they are due to relax, let's say on the 21st of June, if that relaxation goes ahead, I can see a UK Games Expo happening. I think it will be a different UK Games Expo. We know for a fact that the Hilton's not available. So the role-playing side of it will be very different. But there should be, by that point, no restrictions in place. Now, what I think there might
no restrictions at all.
That's what the government have said. Now, I think that there will probably be restrictions in place. I think there might be if you're going to an event, like if you know you're going to an event, there might be a requirement from the event for the people who are going to the event to take a lateral flow test a day or two before the event, for example. And I think that'd be extremely sensible. It's not going to be a guarantee. And I think that quite a lot of people may choose not to go to an event with lots of people. I don't think there will be as many people going, but there will be people. We did a survey, a crude survey for StabCon, which in theory, we're running a StabCon at the start of July. First weekend in July is when the next StabCon would be. We did a poll on the StabCon Facebook group. About 50% of the respondents were, yes, I really want to go. If we can go at all, please, 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 can we have it? So I'm hopeful that we can run a StabCon. I think if we are going to run a StabCon, we will request that people take a lateral flow test beforehand. And if they show positive on the lateral flow test, get a proper test. And if they've got COVID, don't come. And I think people who've not had vaccinations might choose not to come. I think some people who are scared about going into environments with lots of people, which there's quite a lot of gamers who are not really people friendly and will be nervous about how you deal with being in a crowd again and so on. So I think
for me, there's definitely this, speaking personally, okay, because it's weird. Right now, I am putting money into the LDEC and into stuff by Bez, but I'm getting a wee bit of money from, Yogi did quite well, and it's paying my rent at least, and it's enough. And I'm getting occasional work, like in the past 18 months, because let's go a little bit longer than the last year. I've been lucky enough to work for 4 companies that you've probably heard of, one of which is King's College London. The other 3 I'm not really meant to publicly chat about. And, in some situations, it might be, this is a game that's a really big IP, and then we only wanted your consultation for a few hours, but it's not like very much. But for me, like yourself, I think this is very much just a passion. I don't see this as a route to making lots of money or being rich. And last year, or wait, 2 years ago, 3 years ago maybe, what is it? I decided that I've got to have a whimsy budget. I was going to UK Games Expo. It was actually 2019. It was 2018. I was setting up my stand, and I was thinking, do I spend money to have these panels on this wall of cats where people put up thousands of pictures of cats, knowing that probably the expense isn't worth the marketing benefit? That's my gut feeling, that the expense that I paid for those walls was not worth the marketing benefit to me personally. Now, I decided that I've got to have a whimsy budget, because what's the point in having your own business if you can't sometimes spend money on things that aren't maybe the most financially prudent, but you enjoy them?
Did having the wall give you pleasure?
That's the thing. That's exactly what I'm saying. It's my whimsy budget. I decided that's my whimsy budget. And last year, in 2020, I went to Nuremberg. I bought a fancy machine, which, again, you could argue it's marketing, but it's a machine that basically puts games into balloons. So when I went to Aircon, I was actually able to sell Yogi, and I was, if you jiggle them around too much, then maybe they eventually rip the balloon from the inside, but you can actually expand the balloon. And I had this vision of tens of people walking around the UK Games Expo with balloons and games inside, and it just made me happy. I know there's the whole argument of, okay, is it environmentally okay because it's single-use plastic? But we need to do things that make us happy. And going to UK Games Expo, I told Richard, look, I kind of feel like UK Games Expo 2021, if it happens, isn't going to be a great business decision for me personally, especially considering that I'm sold out of Wibble Plus and Kitty Cataclysm, which is kind of unfortunate. But sure, I'll buy some copies of Yogi from Gigamic to sell that, and I've got some books of the Dice and Ink that was published by someone else, and I'll maybe do some playtests, but I will have a very much reduced stand. If it happens and I am able to go, I would like to go in a very small capacity, smaller stand than 2019 for sure. But again, it's about the whimsy budget. It's about the pent-up desire to be there, to be part of it.
I think there's plenty of people who really want to go, and there's others who will go, no, definitely not going to go, not going. That's fine. It's personal choice in the end, absolutely personal choice. But if it can happen, I'm convinced it will happen. There's a chance that it might not be able to happen, but I keep my eye on the government numbers and the statistics and all, and everything seems to be going quite well. What we haven't seen is any sign of an increase in numbers on the back of the relaxations we had a couple of weeks ago, which is good news. I think we've got a chance. I think we've got a good chance of a Games Expo this year, but it will be a different show. It will be the NEC halls, basically. They might still get seminars in, which would be good. We've as an exhibition business, we've got potential work at shows in early July. Not big work, but potential work. But the major stuff that we do is more looking September, October, November. But I think that there is a good chance that we will get something. I'm definitely confident we're going to get something this year. I think, fingers crossed.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the year, we've got Dragon.
Essen possibly less so. Essen might have challenges because there's so much international.
But you talk about numbers not going up, but isn't what we want, ideally, for the numbers to go down, to be reduced to zero?
Numbers of
infections.
Oh, it's never going to go down to zero. It's not. It's never going to go down to zero. I'm afraid. It's not going away.
But isn't that what the vaccines, like the saying, okay, you need 2 doses and then you're vaccinated?
Flu doesn't go away, does it? This is the very sad side of it, but no. There'll be another everybody will probably need another vaccine next winter. The vaccine helps a lot, but if I'm putting my betting man hat on again, I'm convinced there will still be cases of this in 5 years' time.
In 20 years' time? Is that what you're saying?
Probably. It's never going away. It's endemic. It's just not going away. There's only one disease that mankind has ever managed to eliminate. It's just so hard. And the problem with this, because of the real killer, is the asymptomatic transmission. With asymptomatic transmission, it can hide. I think its impact will go away. I don't think the disease will go away. I think what we will end up with is, you'll have maybe a combined flu and COVID jab, like you have a flu jab at the moment. I went and got a flu jab because I could, and if there is a combined flu and COVID jab going forward, then I will certainly be getting it. It's going to make a big difference, and as long as the majority of the population are vaccinated, it will reduce it should reduce the spread. We believe it reduces the spread, and if the spread's reduced, that means it'll be low level, but it will never completely go away. I just can't see it completely going away. Won't become news. It'll stop being newsworthy. You might get an outbreak in a little town, maybe, but
Mm.
very sad.
Yeah, this feels like maybe something to explore fully another time if that's all?
I think we need to. It's an explore fully once we've unlocked. Maybe exploring where the long-term impact of things might be after we've had a Games Expo. Because we'll have seen. The Games Expo will be. It won't feel the same. It'll certainly be different if we have one this year. No, when we have one this year. Let's be positive about this. I'm convinced we're going to have one.
So the final question that I wanted to ask you is about your future and your personal plans for the future, your current ambitions and passions. Again, with the easy questions.
keep doing what I'm doing at the moment. Keep playing games. I want to get back to. I'm not intending going back into games publishing, although I did have an idea. There's a couple of ideas I've had for games or designing. Is that one? No, probably not. My problem with game designing.
So if there's any kind of designers who might be, looking for someone who's a bit better at the business side, they shouldn't look at you.
I really enjoyed doing the developing and the business side of games. It was quite good fun. I enjoyed that. And the real challenge is if I'm going to get involved in games, well, I'm still involved, aren't I? I mean, I'm testing games and developing games for people, but I'm not doing games from a business point of view other than the shop. I think, to be honest, if I kept on doing what I'm doing at the moment for the next 20 years, I'd be a very happy person. And by then I'd be nearly 80. So, that'd be cool. I'm not intending changing if I can possibly avoid it. In terms of ambitions, have I got ambitions? No. Had ambitions, did them, done that, got the t-shirt. The ambitions are dangerous because they make you too driven. I was probably not a great person, not as nice a person to know when I was focused on trying to do I wanted to be Wargaming World Champion. And that was it. I was focused on that. Well, and publishing board games.
Because it made you forget about the importance of interpersonal relationships and kindness.
Possibly so, yeah. Possibly so. I mean, I was maybe a lot more scary. In terms of playing games, maybe I was quite scary at the time. Very focused. Focused is the word I use. I was focused. And it's one of those things you don't notice when you're doing it. You only notice after you stop doing it. I'd like to go on another round the world trip. That was good fun. Did a wargaming tournament in New Zealand, and I'd always promised Michelle that when the wargaming was in New Zealand, we'd go to New Zealand. And when we looked at it and the logistics of it, it made sense just to get a round the world ticket, and it made sense to quit work for a month for 3 months and take our time over it. So we did 3 months around the world with a wargaming trip in the middle. So it wasn't a holiday, it was a wargaming trip. I'd like to do something like that again. It was brilliant. Really enjoyed that. There's loads. There's a few things I'd like to do, but they're not in terms of from a games point of view and from a business point of view.
It sounds like it's basically small treats, small delights that you want. Well, a round the world trip isn't exactly small, but personal delights, things that won't necessarily affect other people in a big, far-reaching way. But in terms of your
I'm quite happy
involvement with others, you want to continue and
absolutely
get back to the world as it was a couple of years ago.
You're right. I've already got events booked in at the shop for, we've got a games event, a wargaming tournament booked in at the shop for June the 28th, 29th, the first Saturday after the relaxation, if it all goes ahead on time. We've got an event booked in and it's fully booked. And then the weekend after that is StabCon, and we're aiming to be running that, and we're hoping to get about 150 people to StabCon. 2 weekends after that, I've got another event booked in at the shop, which is 20 to 30 people. The fully booked event's only 18 because we're doing it at a reduced capacity. And then the weekend after that, I've got another event booked in at the shop that I'm going to be running. So I'm going to go back to be running events as soon as I possibly can. And I'm going to keep running events as long as I possibly can. There you go. because events and meeting people is what it's all about.
Let me actually ask you, when you open up that event in July, do you think it was at the end of June, right?
End of June event, yeah.
End of June event, I do apologize. Are you going to be personally making any requirements or encouragements before coming, like people having to wear masks or anything?
We'll probably, for that one, be wearing masks. We don't know, probably. I will probably, I think I'm going to suggest to the guy who's organising it the idea of a pre-event lateral flow test, because you can get them for free, so why not use them? We're running the event with 2 meter distancing between each table. So basically it will be social, even though in theory by that date there will be no requirement for social distancing. We'll be having 6 tables in a space that will take 16. And if you arrange the tables in a particular way, you get it so that there's 2 meters at least between everybody at different tables.
So in theory, this event could actually run tomorrow?
No. No. Because it's indoors. And indoors at the moment, you're not allowed to meet anybody indoors. As of the 17th of May, the relaxation goes to group rule of 6 indoors. And that would mean you could have an event with 6 people indoors, and you could have multiple events with 6 people indoors. But the way of a War Games tournament is that people will play one person, then they'll play another person, then they'll play another person.
Mm-mm.
So if you can run a pod of 6 people where you have a group of 6 and each person plays the other 5 people in the group. So you get 5 games, everybody plays everybody. That works really nicely, but it limits to a group of 6. But if you want to go to more than 6 people, the moment you start having more than 6 people together, if you're trying to run it as a tournament, you're going to have one person meeting people A, C, F, G, J, and Q, and another one working B, C, and when you work out all the who's met who, it's way over 6. So even rule of 6 doesn't allow you to do the kind of event we want to run in July. And what we want to run is an event where there's 18 players, and we'll run it as a Swiss. You come across the Swiss tournament concept? Yeah. So we're running a Swiss tournament basically. Yeah, you couldn't run it at all today. As of May the 17th, you could run it if you kept people in pods of 6. From June the 21st, assuming everything goes to plan, you'll be able to do what we want to do.
And these are the rules for England only?
Yes. This is what we believe the rules for England only will be, assuming they don't change. Which,
of course, the government has done, but it's perfectly fine. People should change what they say if
absolutely
new data comes to emerge.
We will for the event in June, if it goes ahead, we'll require people to wear masks. We're putting in social distancing, and we'll probably say, can you do a lateral flow test before you come? And on that basis, it's going to be as safe as we can possibly make it. We might even take people's temperatures when they turn up at the venue as well, because we've got a remote thermometer thing as well.
Why not? Also, then I guess you risk maybe someone's just run over there, or
yeah, but thermometers. There's ways of it's everything you can do. You can't be too safe. But
of course,
for the later event, well, for StabCon again, we'll probably ask people to take a lateral flow test beforehand. It's not an onerous thing to do. Yeah, play it by ear to some extent.
Alex suggests those really long war room croupier rakes.
Good idea. Yeah, difficult to move model soldiers though, because you knock the trees over if you're not careful. But yeah, did you see the Plastic Soldier Company demos of the Battle of Britain game that they did?
No.
They redid the Battle of Britain game, and they made a giant size version of the map, and they had women in WAF uniforms pushing the models around with the rakes on the big board. It was brilliant.
Nice.
Yeah.
So as we finish up, Alex with the easy questions wants to know, what's the meaning of life? And we've got, do you have any recommendations for a war game other than Quartermaster General?
Ooh, many. Depends on how long and what kind of war game you want.
Let's assume it's someone who's coming from the board gaming scenario, so they maybe don't want to play a week-long thing.
Somebody coming from if you're coming from a normal board games background and you want to try a war game, there are a couple of routes in that work quite nicely. One route is the Command and Colors system, which is Richard Borg, can't remember, one of the Richards. So there's Memoir 44, Command and Colors, The Great War, Command and Colors, Napoleonics and Ancients, and so on. They are quite good ways in to a war game from a board game point of view, and then more war gamey than Quartermaster General. Quartermaster General is very much a it's not really a war game, but it's a brilliant game. The other way in is to look at the Coin games from GMT. There's a series of games called Coin, C-O-I, which the name is Coin, C-O-I-N. They're sort of counterinsurgency, asymmetrical type games. That's Command and Colors, Ancients. You're muted, Bears.
It is Richard Borg with an O.
Borg with an O, yeah. Okay.
But you talk about counterinsurgency and Coin. And Roots is one that's an actual counterinsurgency game.
Yes, Roots are really good. Roots is really a war game. It's a very good asymmetrical war game. If you want to get into what I'd call a proper hex war game, then have no eyes in the Coin games. Excellent, good taste then. The older hex war games, GMT makes some really good games, and they're probably the most active publishers of that style of game at the moment. There used to be some really nice, easy ways into war games, but let's go with Memoir, the Command and Colors series, and Coin. And I think those are probably two good ways into war games. War games are moving more Euro in their style. Something like World in Flames is clearly not Euro. It's stacks of counters, adding up factors, looking up combat tables, rolling dice a lot. It's very, very not Euro. Quartermaster General, on the other hand, is extremely Euro. It's just a card-driven, very clever card-driven game with no dice at all. There you go. Recommendations on war games.
Well, thank you so much for...
Been interesting.
It's been a lovely chat. I want to recap where a little bit of what we said based on my notes. We talked about polarity. We talked about packaging. We talked about having all the games. We talked about minis. We talked about cheese and chocolate. We talked about Izal and chess and wargaming and walking to save money so that you can spend it on little 8p miniatures.
True.
About diplomacy, about ways to play it, Dungeons and Dragons, JRPG, setting up a war game club, letters, writing letters based on diplomacy in a maths test, in a mock exam. We talked about all the LARPs, about Treasure Trap, going into Labyrinth, going into business with Realm, and I'd be really interested to delve into how a business model like that can work. We talked about having hundreds of people for stabbing with, hey, this is all about stabbing, which I just assumed it was an acronym.
You thought it was Stockport area board games? Yeah, it's not.
We talked about DBA. We talked about Martin Wallace, of course. We talked about doing things because you want. We talked about, and yeah, for sure, when I first played Tinner's Trail with Ian Smith in Glasgow, I said, this is such a clever thematic rule that when you every time you mine, more water goes in. The cost to mine is basically multiplied by the amount of water in there. So there's a desire to be super efficient, but then if you wait until you can mine everything, then you lose your tempo, so you don't get the resources, so you can't build stuff, and it's a really, really interesting decision. Anyway, I'm not saying that's my favorite game of all time, far from it. Not that I don't like it. What's there's just so many games, you know what I mean? It's not, but I just think that that's definitely genius, and I would happily play it right now if someone came along and we were able to play games in the kitchen safely. Then 100%. We talked about how money changes things and how things are changed. We talked about getting involved with UK Games Expo, Plastic Soldier Company, giving advice, running tournaments, and Treefrog all at one time in one weekend. We talked about the nature of running tournaments, about how things have changed for COVID, about how conventions might or might not change, about struggling during these times with a business. And we even had a couple of recommendations, which were coin and commands and colors. So if you are interested in that, one that I personally like the beautiful map of, and also is Napoleon's Triumph. I don't know your thoughts on that one.
Yeah, I've not played it. It's beautiful though. I agree. I'm not a massive player of Napoleonic games. I used to do Napoleonic miniatures. I own a copy of Wellington's Victory, which is a big Napoleonic war game, but I tend not to play them nowadays. Although there are rumours of a Quartermaster General Napoleonic game. Now that might be quite good.
And as Alex has said, it has been lovely to meet you. And of course, thank you, Hammy. And thank you, of course, everyone who's been parts of the audience.
Some great questions.
Yeah, fantastic. And it's been all very respectful, which is always lovely to see, with people popping in and saying hello and occasionally asking some, very great, stimulating some lovely discussion. So thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah.
And
it's been lovely.
If
really enjoyed
you want to follow me on all the things, then they're scrolling at the bottom. Stuff by Bez basically everywhere. On Facebook, search for Stuff by Bez. Twitch, YouTube for all the old episodes. stuffbybez.com/Discord. That's the big one that I like to point people towards. And of course, follow the LDEC Twitter, which is on Twitter. I'm trying to make Stuff by Bez like more of a personal thing, where I'm just chatting about whatever I want, if you know what I mean. I allow myself to be a little bit political very occasionally, but with LDEC it is very much I'm going to be honest, it is a promotional thing, but it's all about games. And Alex has actually made a puzzle which was put up for the second time yesterday, and every 2 or 3 days, so Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays, there's a little puzzle that you can spend maybe 30 seconds or a minute just pondering, what would be a word that fits in these criteria? If you like creativity games and word games, please do check that out. For James, if you want to let people know where you would like to be found in Stockport, or alternatively on the internet.
On the internet, well, on Facebook, I'm James Hammy Hamilton, nice and easy. Battlefieldhobbies.uk, that's the shop Facebook page. And there is a StabCon group, but we tend to restrict it to people who only come to StabCon because we're horrible like that. Facebook, I don't really use Twitter. I have a Twitter account, but I very rarely use it, so that's probably not much point. I happily accept friend requests on Facebook if people want to follow my ramblings, because people seem to do that, and I have far too many Facebook friends, but I don't mind. Yeah, been really interesting. Good to talk, Bez.
So you're not one of these people who feels like, okay, every Facebook friend, I have to know who you are, and I...
No, I kind of... I look at Facebook friends and I go, oh, you're somebody who knows me because of that. And so not last summer, the summer before, I went to a wargaming tournament in Serbia, thing called the European Team Championships, which is actually a World Championships event. And I got there before the rest of the British guys, and I was there downstairs in the the airport entry area at the bar, trying to get a drink and talking and saw some other people with obviously gaming stuff. And one of them goes, "Oh, Hammy, hi." And it's somebody who's a Facebook friend of mine who I've never met, and I encountered them in an airport in Serbia. There you go.
Wow. And so, yeah, Facebook friend, says Alex. Yeah, I get it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
This is the final section where I ask all the audience, as well as you, James Hammy, over to you. Yeah. What are you up to? You can share, but only if you want to. So please, if you've got anything that you're looking forward to doing today, share the good times, or if you've got something that you just feel like you're obligated, you want to be obligated to do, maybe you tell us about it. I am maybe going to be treating myself to a fish and chips takeaway today.
Wow.
I will go in and yeah, I'm quite looking forward to that. That's going to be my breakfast. I normally don't eat in the mornings when I'm at home. If I'm at a convention, do I make sure to eat in the morning because I might not get to eat in the afternoon?
Yeah, a big breakfast, then you might not bother eating later on because you forget. Absolutely. We've all done that.
But for sure, when I'm at home, it's like, okay, getting up, getting myself maybe washed, having a quick walk around the house, getting prepared for this. This is me basically the thing that forces me out of bed. But I'm also hoping to do a tiny bit of more tidying, and tonight I am going to be playing a game. I'm still hoping it's going to be Wee Whimsical Creatures, but if it is, because I wasn't able to find my Wee Whimsical Creatures, which is a whole bunch of little creatures that I've drawn, I will have to spend a bit of time redrawing a whole bunch of things. Yeah, so that will be for a few hours. What I'll do, I'll draw a whole new deck, and then, hey, maybe there'll be even more exciting Wee Whimsical Creatures. So what are you up to?
This afternoon, well, I'm going to have to do some boring work stuff. The phone call that we were interrupted in, I've got to deal with the stuff to do with that. Later today, I'm hopefully going to be painting some tiny toy soldiers, not using contrast paint. Ooh. I'm in the middle of painting some Thracians.
Old school.
Yeah, old school little figures for toy soldiers. What other things am I likely to do? Probably watch too much TV, which seems to be the normal thing in lockdown, and go out for a walk and buy the winning lottery ticket. That's the most important thing. Buy the winning lottery ticket. That'll solve the problems. There you go.
Alex is taking children to the park and enjoying the sunshine. That sounds like a lovely plan. I hope you have a wonderful day with your family. And yep, it's been lovely to have you. I'm going to quickly once more mention all my forthcoming streams. So tonight, definitely a game, either Wee Whimsical Creatures, or if I'm not able to draw at the last minute, I'll change it to Truth and Facts and a Half, but it will be with some lovely people. You'll be able to play along anyway. Tomorrow, I am actually making a game. I'm doing some developments and design live with Rita Modal and Tiz Creole, who did Men at Work and a whole bunch of visual design. Thursday, chatting about marketing with Dina. Friday is a Friendly Friday forum. I'm going to be in the garden, and feel free to join me virtually, and we will be talking. I decided that we'd have a kind of, not a book club, but like an article club or a thoughts club. And I don't know if you've read the article about the geek fallacies. Like one is the transitive nature of friends, which isn't actually true, but there's a whole load of social geek fallacies. And I thought this was a really interesting article, and maybe we could have a wee ponder about it.
Why not?
And then Saturday, we'll be discussing self-publishing with Jess Mederingham, Nikita Sullivan, Janice Turner, and Andy Hopwood, of a whole bunch of lovely designers. And on Sunday will probably be my final reviewing stream, where I review literally anything that people email to me. And if you need my email, it is stuffbybez@gmail.com. And so, yeah, that's the end of the show. If you want to raid, then please stick around. And Alex says, they are not children, they are small goats. And You're yeah. Geek fallacies. Let me see. Here we go. It's on plausiblydeniable.com/5geek fallacies. Let me actually link to it in all the places. There we go. So you can see it there. And yep. Now that's the end of the show. If you're watching on Twitch, then of course, please do stick around for the raid. I am just going to see who is doing stuff right now that I can direct you to. Let's go for Idle Michael, friends of the show. And let me say that is the end. And there is only one thing left to do, unless you have any final burning words, Hammy?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay, in that case,
bye-bye.
Bye, bye, bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. And bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Yep. That's basically the end of the show.
Cool.
And I'm just going to say bye-bye again.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Oh, thank you very much.
Oh.